stage by warming the atmosphere like 0.1 or 2 degrees.
I agree.
So,
I would agree. I mean, it would have to be.
It seems more likely that we're just not having that much of an effect at all, at least with CO2. Like, we may be having effects in other ways.
Yeah.
But CO2, I don't know. I mean,
maybe I'm being over-optimistic.
You're trying to give these people hope.
I don't.
There's no hope, Randall. The
We just
climate is going to
burn
change.
more fossil fuels.
The climate is going to change. It's not going to have anything to do with stuff we do, and we're going to have to adapt to it.
And that was the point of this article.
Okay.
That we're going to have to adapt, and I agree with that. I mean, but here's my concern is, okay, let's say we shut down fossil fuel use, and all of the technology and industry that would then also have to disappear.
And the materials. Yeah.
And what?
All the materials. Like, so much stuff aside from burning fuel comes from the petrol industry.
Well, yeah. So what would that do to our adaptability and our ability to respond to a natural climate change? I can't see that it would be anything other than drastically inhibit our ability to respond effectively.
Yeah, we go back to living in heap houses or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Neolithic pile houses. And most of it's are going to be Utsi.
Yeah.
Frozen in the glacier for 5,000 years.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even a return to Little Ice Age conditions could be really, I mean, that could require some major efforts to adapt to, because there were times when the Northern Hemisphere saw like a couple of years in a row of agricultural collapses.
But look, we can build greenhouses. We need plastics. We need, we could keep the farming going in a Little Ice Age scenario today with fossil fuels.
Yeah, plastics.
It's fossil fuels. Yeah. And possibly now, we'll have to see again. Another discussion we've got to have, I think, further. The time has come to discuss plasma energy, because there are independent sources besides the Malcolm Bendel source. There's also, there's this. Have you guys seen this book here?
Oh yeah, I did.
Robert
see that.
Temple's book. Robert Temple. He was the serious mystery guy.
Yeah.
Remember that? I'm reading this. I'm about this far into it, and I mean, it's
one bullet
stuff,
off,
and
but
the
it was
argument
gonna pass away anyways.
Yeah, that it very well could be the basis for where technology could evolve to. And if that happens, if you look at the thunderstorm generator, the technology that's now being tested in several laboratories, including a major one, Eastern laboratory, and in a German laboratory now, what do we see happening there is that it looks like several things. One is that, okay, when you have to get the requisite temperatures to cause the dissociation of electrons and protons.
I don't know if it's gonna work.
In this stream of plasma.
I don't think it's
That's
gonna
the
work.
First thing. Then the second thing is to stimulate that plasma to self-organize into these elegant geometries that now emit energy. In a nutshell, if I'm understanding how it works, right? Well, a couple of things there. One, you need fossil fuels or some way of generating the initial temperatures. So there would still be a function for fossil fuels, just you wouldn't be using it to the extent that we are now. And I think, did we talk about this in the live stream about how rapidly global cooling can cause the oceans to start sucking out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere?
I can't believe it.
Yes.
It's a miracle.
Yeah.
It's a miracle.
We have talked about it before. I don't know if it was in the last live stream, but we have discussed
We
that.
have talked about
It becomes a carbon sink. Yeah.
Yes, it becomes a massive carbon sink.
Like a big
And
soda.
once it goes into the oceans, it's pretty much going to end up in the
Sequestered in the rock.
Exactly, sequestered in the rock, and then that's it. It's gone out of the atmosphere for 100,000 or 1 million years or more. So, yeah, I mean, the important thing I think we need to do now is to try to, just
No upload.
counter.
What's the
this
time though?
narrative.
What's the
And
time on
a
that
lot of
run?
people that aren't buying
No
it.
upload.
But, you know, the idea is absolutely...
Oh, always 116, eh? What is that pace? What is that even? I always am pacing that. Always. I don't know what that is. 140?
I mean, you know what drives me crazy is
Maybe
when
140,
I see people,
maybe a little better.
Throwing trash out the windows of their
I
car.
don't know.
You know, I've noticed something very interesting in the travels.
Always
When we
116,
get into
man.
poorer counties, where,
What does it mean?
for example, and I don't mean to be
I don't know.
bigoted or whatever here, but when you get into the poorer counties, which usually means less educated, you see more trash. When you come into the counties where,
Damn it, that was a good
drives through whatever the counties that the bluegrass region of Kentucky, and you're driving through those fairly upscale counties with the beautiful white fences and the pastoral, you don't see any trash.
I don't.
You know, you go into the other counties where it's a lot of trailer parks and things. Yeah, then you see, and I've seen this over and over again. It's not just something that I've seen one time. I've noticed it a lot.
Yes. I would suggest, though, that it's not because there's less trash being thrown out.
Yeah, it's because
there's
more money
people
for people to
picking
pick
it up and cleaning it up.
Yeah.
There's more resources and people that will dedicate resources to cleaning.
Yeah.
Well, I generally think that I bet you that if you looked at more educated people, they're going to be less inclined to throw their trash out windows of their car. I would just think that. Maybe I'm wrong. You know, look, here's 4 of us, and I bet I could say 100% that none of us throw trash out the windows when we're driving.
No, we don't out the window.
I'm only literally playing it out because we got the fast reaction.
Cores, yeah, anything that an animal
We have no health.
Yeah,
banana peels.
Orange peel.
I know, some of my earliest memories of my dad was him ranting and raving about trash.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
see, your dad and myself would be exactly in line with that.
He's a preservationist. He loves nature, so
yeah, we learned that. I feel the same way about trash. I hate it.
yeah.
And then think about the tours we do. I could almost declare that 100% of those people are not going to be throwing trash out the windows.
There's a couple of times when whoever was riding in the passenger seat of my van left a lot of trash in my van.
In the van.
Yes, the vans are full of trash by the time we're done with our tours, but there's none in the forest and places we went to visit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen the cigarette butts getting thrown out. That's that's just so common.
Oh man, that's the absolute
out of me.
hits of And you know, a lot of these big fires, you know, what was it? The fires in a lot of these fires that happened, you know, in fact, some studies are showing that up to 3/4 of them are caused by humans, directly or indirectly. Campfires, cigarette butts, or indirectly because power lines are being knocked over, or you know, whatever it might be. The rest are going to be natural, mostly lightning strikes.
Yeah, so with the cigarette butts, I was a smoker for a long time, and when I was younger, I did throw butts out the window, but I stopped that a long time ago and always.
Oh yeah. I smoked for a year when I was 15, 16. I quit by the time I was 17, but yeah, I remember. I even have a picture. I'm riding with some of my buddies, and I'm sitting there smoking a cigarette.
Yeah.
And we picked up this hitchhiker, and one of the guys that I was with threw something out the window, and myself and the hitchhiker were just totally getting on his case.
Yeah.
About, you know, hey, you know,
man.
Don't throw your shit out the window.
Don't throw. Flick the cigarette butt out and be like, don't throw trash.
No, I'm like, hey man, that's what we got an ashtray for. Because you may remember the days when cars came equipped with ashtrays.
Yes.
And cigarette lighters.
Yo, Jersey,
but
what's
it's
up?
Totally
How are you?
Cool to throw your
How are ya?
roaches out, right?
Right.
Cigarette smokers, you can't throw your cigarette
you
butts
doing?
down, but if it's a roach,
Yeah, you got a roach. Toss
That
it,
was
man.
not something back in the day. That was not
Doing
something
well.
I would ever do.
We're
I
back.
would smoke that thing down until it was microscopic.
We got ChatGPT now. We've
was
elevated
not about to throw roaches out
our
the window. That was
stream
the
with
best part.
ChatGPT. Check this out.
So,
There we go.
oh,
Brad's like,
I just let the
gonna
cat
have
out
to
of
do
the
some
So
editing.
ChatGPT
Always
God,
think
It
of
gives
that.
an odd job
What's
to
gonna
happen,
now if
to
people
occur,
realize, oh,
to show that you're
Meryl
not
Carlson
you're not
once smoked some
you're
pot.
actually playing live. So that's like
credibility's
Chat
gone, man.
GPT saying a
All
random
credibility
level
gone. Oh, he's
archives.
just another stoner.
Infiltrate archives, secure valuable intelligence without
All right,
alerting
well,
the
we
guards
better wrap it up.
or setting off
Yeah,
any
that
alarms.
was a fun show.
Hmm. Interesting. I'm
RandallCarlson.com,
good. How are you, Jernsey?
Yep.
Right? Yep. You guys working
That's
on
the
some
big one.
revamp for
Oh,
the
that's not
website
good.
too? That coming up, maybe?
Yes.
I'm good. How are you?
Always ideas of revamps.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're not going to shoot
Coming up.
here because that would alert
And,
alert peeps.
Yeah. So I guess
Expand. Grow,
Yes.
More. More Randall.
more.
Randall.
So before we go, no, you guys
God,
still looks like
Natalia.
you're on for Egypt in February.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. 6 weeks.
Yes, because we're doing the February tour.
I'm
and
great,
then-
kinda. Oh,
and then
no
we're doing
way.
Another one in March, right after.
I hope everything's okay.
So it's gonna be 2 of them back to back. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
They had quite the waiting list, so.
You are
Yeah,
going
we had to
ready for
cancel the
number 2.
extension to Lebanon, and now
Yeah.
and we talked about possibly doing an extension in Egypt, but we just decided like there's so many people on the waiting list, we'll just
So the 2 tours will be back to back, but they'll basically be the same tour.
That'll be the
That's
same.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, maybe you can finagle a little bit.
I hope you're doing
some
okay.
sites. Yeah, I mean with 6
Yeah,
weeks.
there's-
really
there's
Yo,
always a little
Greg, also,
variability.
if you're
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
to see.
I know
mean, there's
stream
so much to
ended.
see.
Yeah.
I was
And you could
talking.
spend
I might
days
have to
in one
type
place,
it.
You know, when I was there for
I don't
10
want to type
days,
it though
that
because
was
I don't
not
want to dox
Yeah.
Russ.
Oh, no.
But
We
anyways,
are
saying
gonna
that
go
I'm
to
spending
some
more
places
time
we
with my
haven't
father.
seen yet.
Okay.
We've been
Also,
twice, and we're gonna get to go to some
and
new
that's a
places.
good
So
idea for you to
getting
move
go those new
home,
places
Russ
twice
or
Uh-huh.
gonna be
Greg.
great.
Yeah.
My father's name is Greg.
But yeah, we'll be going back to other sites.
And
we've
you
already
and
seen,
Russ
but
Jericho's
still, I mean, each one
experiences
is so
Make me spend more time with my
They're so
father. So
enormous,
thank
it's
you.
like
I'm not
you
like
always see
bragging. I'm
something
saying
new.
that like the lessons that
Yeah.
we learn from
And
people
I mean,
that
we have
pass.
multiple of these sites. I already know multiple things I want to check again.
And Russ
get better
Jericho's
pictures or
father's
footage
passed
of,
away
Yep.
last 3 weeks.
New, things that I noticed
So,
later after
and
we
he
got
said
home
that he was
I
a
saw in the
trucker in
photos
the
that I
UK
didn't see while I
and
was there. Well, I'm like, I
he
need to go
came
look at
back
this.
Yep.
There's
to,
this one
to
joint in this
reconnect
one
with
block.
Russ
We're
more.
on the fifth level of
And
this
that's it, we're just
block.
memories.
On the north
I need
Like
to
wall.
look
each
at that
moment,
is.
like I was going through all the photo albums. That's all
Bring
we
your
are, just happy
magnifying
memories
glass.
in time.
They know. They run right to it.
And it's like, how are you gonna live right
Well, that's
now
awesome,
in this
guys.
moment?
Time.
Well, all
Are you
right. It was
gonna make a
fun.
happy memory?
Yep.
Yes.
All right.
Then
Learned
like
some stuff.
Yeah.
that's pretty much you're doing the right
And
thing.
I'll
That's
see
all
you
you
next
can
week, I
do.
guess.
That's right.
That's all you
All
need
right.
to do
Thanks, guys. Good night.
for it to be
Good night.
perfect,
Good night,
and you
everybody.
can do it. That's what I learned from you and Russ. Oh come on, give me a come on. Help peeps in need. I sure am okay. I'm okay. I'm okay, Jernsey. I'm doing all right now that you're here. My Streamlabs isn't doing, or my OBS isn't doing so good. It keeps ending stream. I think I'm trying to stream too high settings. I'm doing it wirelessly. I'm not even wired. Can you believe it? I think my stream quality will improve significantly if I ever get it wired to the modem. I sure am okay. I'm not even making any sense. I think I've gone like off the deep end. I think I lost my mind. Why? So tired, I bet. What is that in Netherlands? That's freaking like 3 a.m. or something. You're streaming. You should sleep. Not to like shoo you away from my stream. I'm so glad you're here. That's not the right perception, but yeah, so Jersey, check this out. The reason why I'm talking about ChatGPT also with you is because I think you might find this really cool and fun. Is if you use Stream Elements, check out this image. It is the command for ChatGPT to make a command. And you can change within 256 characters the command. So I got two set up here. It's not exactly accurate what's written, but it's kind of. That's ChatGPT's response. Then we have this. So you can add this to your chat too. So this is to prove that you're not like cheating, you know. Let me do it again, just for the, like 17 shots at 32 degrees. Okay, what's that? That's about 32 degrees, right? That's it. Validated. Validated. It's genius. You can use it too. That's what I'm saying. It's not like I'm saying I'm genius. I'm saying we can all use this, and we can. You guys will probably create some even better stuff. Yo, thanks, bro. Aww. The Challenger is 4-door. Or Charger's 4-door. Nice. Dude, that thing is a zippy thing, dude. Is it manual or automatic transmission? Manual? Automatic? Manual? I had an RSX. I had a 2002. RSX manual. I did Uber Eats. I think you were in there. Uber Eats streams. You may have gifted a sub or two. Thanks, bro. What's the curb weight? It's a nice light little car. Weeks ago.
In various places, you had just incredible flooding, and also incredible fire. There's been tons of different levels of analysis. There's now more than like 150 peer-reviewed scientific papers that really deal with the nuance and the detail of what is all of the evidence for this period of time. It has a lot to do with analysis of things like ice core samples, where we can drill down into the ice in places like Antarctica and Greenland and in Russia and places, because every year as the snow falls, it gets compressed into ice, and it contains data about things like oxygen isotopes. We can look at temperatures and particulate matter, and we're getting very good at like drilling down, taking these cores out that go back in some cases hundreds of thousands of years.
I'd like to welcome to the show Ben Van Kirkwick. How you doing, Ben?
Good. Thanks. Yeah, Alex, it's great to be here, man. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I'm so excited to talk to you about one of my favorite conversations, ancient civilizations and lost history and all the stuff that the mainstream archaeology community a lot of times says it's a bug of hogwash. But I always like to really dig into these questions. It's all about asking these questions. Awesome.
Yeah, I rusted away though. Yo, what's up, Bar? How are you, man?
Really? Was it made? The pyramids made with slaves? But like that doesn't
How are you,
make
man?
sense. And did we really start 6,000 years ago? Well, there's this thing called Göbekli Tepe. They just showed up in the 1940s, for God's sake. All these kind of things are changing our origins.
I'm using to watch them, guys.
About our human origins, but also
sorry for being so
our spiritual origins, where we're coming from, all that kind of stuff. So
that's why I'm gonna go and take a little break.
In my eyes, with Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson,
thank you.
Those kind of guys who are fighting the good fight, taking the arrows in the back, as they say.
What are you up to these days, man? What are you doing? You're working?
I appreciate the work you're doing, brother.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's high praise indeed. I look up to those guys greatly as well.
I'm a legend nurse.
The reason I got into this in the first place, but I think
out in LA.
I think you described it well.
All the honeys,
a lot of
all
this
the ladies.
is really about asking questions. I think the
other fall
element, to this whole field, or this journey of trying to discover and
like
understand
autumn, you mean, not like physical fall. Switch majors.
What we've always said is.
Oh yeah, I think you told me about
part of
that.
That is really embracing and being open-minded.
What did you switch to?
That, particularly.
I remember you told me that.
Is
really no, literally understand,
bro.
Yeah, I understand.
And changing the
yeah, take your time with school, man.
Of that,
if you change something, you gotta do it right.
Earliest parts of our history, like we kind of
like I'm thinking of doing archaeology again.
The last 4,000 or 5,000 years, in terms of what's happened.
What did you switch to, my man?
What happened before that? Where did those?
I think you told me before. I'm such a fool.
Where did they get their roots?
I can't remember. I'm sorry.
And, what has happened in the potentially in hundreds of thousands of years before that? Because there's been just a tremendous amount of new evidence that comes from adjacent scientific fields as well as within archaeology.
Yeah, you
mentioned Göbekli Tepe. That's a big one. That I think should be having a massive impact on the story of our past. And I mean, as is the case with lots of different established scientific fields, change is slow to come, right? The very nature of establishment is to resist change and to maintain the status quo. But I do think now, at this point, there's an accumulation of evidence coming from these fields. We know an awful lot more. Cataclysm, the human timeline, the genetic complexity of the human race. We keep getting older and older. We keep finding older and older stuff. The further back we go, it seems like the more sophisticated the stuff is that we're finding in a lot of cases. This is true.
I think we talked. Yeah, we did talk about it because we talked about
things like that, and I do think.
Yeah, physical ed teacher for like a university. Doing it for the university would be insane, or like a hospital or something. Like
the history of our
Or you have your
civilization
own
and
practice.
of
Like,
our race.
holy moly, man.
No, I've been talking to some
That
people
is
on the show
next
about
level
this
thinking,
great
bro.
shift in human consciousness that we're all
And there's
becoming more
always
awakened to what is
a high.
just to what we truly are.
There's always customers. You know, I'm not
The
saying like people get
information that's
injured or
coming
whatever,
out
but like
and the questions that people are asking
that's
are
smart,
becoming
man.
more and more broad.
Nursing,
more and more
yeah. I'm
open,
sure
where
they
they
probably
wouldn't
use
have
you too
20,
with
10,
kinesiology. You
15,
can use
20
it in
years ago.
practice, or even get part
Why
of
do you
university
believe
or something.
now that a lot of these
Works for like
questions,
sport
and it really,
teams.
I mean, Graham
LA,
really is one of the forefathers
all
of
the
this,
sport teams
of
there.
these
The
asking these
Galaxy
deep questions. But when Fingerprints of the Gods came out,
from
which was
Mexico,
what, the
Team
90s?
Mexico,
95,
Barra,
Yeah, about
on
95
the
is when
sidelines
that
with
came
the
out.
fucking PE.
It started kind of more people
They
started
call
to
them in. They
ask
need
these
a
questions. Why do you think
a
in
10th
general
player.
people are becoming more and more
Or
curious about our
subs in,
origins?
scores a goal.
And secondly, why are we starting to find
I can see it now.
stuff that just has no
serious, man.
explanation?
I'm serious. Like,
the
I'm not
evidence that we're
joking.
starting to find is just like
That's
you
big
could,
time
you could argue
out in LA. I saw
the
it
pyramids,
myself
even on a
in
losing
San Francisco at
argument
UC Berkeley.
But there's certain things that you
I
just like.
had a friend
I'm sorry,
who's a
man, the
PE
caves in China,
kinesiology major. He worked
the
at
underground
University of
cities
Berkeley
in
as a
Turkey that
PE
they're
guy.
finding Göbekli Tepe.
tour.
All of these things are being found and
California's
really
not messing
analyzed
around,
at
man.
such a deep level. Why do you think it's happening at this point?
Well, there's a couple of questions in there. I mean, one of the reasons I think that this is I do, and I feel the same way. I feel like there's a groundswell movement. There are more and more people interested in these topics. One of the reasons I think is that there's this type of information.
I'm thinking of
is much
doing
more
university
readily available
again.
to everybody now. So you've had the rise of the
I think I'm
internet
doing archaeology.
and particularly like video and new media platforms, YouTube, things like
I think
this.
I'm doing archaeology.
Are helping to
I'm
spread
good, man.
a lot of these topics, because prior to the type
Doing
of
well,
content
dude.
that we're seeing today on those platforms and its
I
popularity,
just came back from
a lot of this information was out there as
Miami and Fort
concepts and
Lauderdale. I was
ideas
there for a
about,
week.
like, there is a lot of contradictions. There is a lot of new evidence. There is a lot of problems with the established narrative
What I've been up to.
around our history. That type of data was contained in these books, you know, and you have to
Good
be
question,
really into
man.
the field. You've got to read
I
these
quit
books.
the life
It's
insurance,
guys like, you know, Graham and his predecessors as
and
well.
I'm not doing that anymore.
Talking about these topics,
I
and
quit
and
the
if you go
life
back further
insurance
than that, it's
gig
kind of like
because
a
I wasn't making any
discussion
money,
of
and the bill, like,
any
it
of
was
this
costing
data
too much
and
per
nuance
month.
that's involved in this discussion was
The
really
maintenance
very
fees
much
were like
limited to
$75 a month.
academic halls, you know, like it was
A little more.
the academics, the Egyptologists. It was them and their peers that were discussing
Yeah,
this. There might have been
I
some
left that
societies and
job too.
organizations that were into like
I don't know. I
exploring stuff, but these are very select and kind
I
of
didn't
elite
enjoy it.
organizations. It's not
It
really
was
a public
it was my
awareness thing.
passion,
So
you know.
we've seen this transition into this new media.
Thanks,
field. We've
bro.
seen the
Thanks for
rise of
asking me,
some of
man.
these
Thanks for this
alternative ideas and
random
the logic,
talk. It
and I
wasn't my
think
passion. I was kind of thrown into that job. I kind of had to
arguments
take
and the
over
cases
that
they're making
job
from guys like Graham,
from a head injury.
Robert Boval. There's so many John
Commercials,
Anthony
yeah, I
people
got
that
a lot of
have written these
ads,
books,
man. I got a lot of
and
ads,
you know,
man.
and then that's translated then into new media, and we have the internet, and these ideas are spreading, and I think they make a lot of, obviously they do make a lot of sense. There is a lot of challenging evidence, and as we've gone forward, particularly in the last 20 years, we've made these new discoveries. We've started to apply our modern technology to some of these discoveries, often in, you know, this is efforts of people that are well and truly outside of these fields. They're outsiders, they're engineers, they're, you know, they're just interested people that typically aren't in these academic fields, that are trying to apply, you know, modern techniques.
You're back? I'm back.
uncover
Nice,
the
thanks,
truth
buddy.
about some of these new finds. And it's very, very challenging for
So
that
yeah,
story.
I mean, I had to fight for that
if you just
job.
look at Cataclysm alone,
It
I
was-
think
it
this
was
is
a
a
crazy
huge
spiritual
piece of the
learning
puzzle. And
experience.
this,
I had to
this is not
fight
something
for the
this is very
job
much in the last
that
20 years we've
wasn't
discovered
passionate for
that
because of
the
my
Earth
head
has been through
injury.
this tremendously catastrophic
In order
and
to maintain
cataclysmic
my
period,
benefits,
and,
like,
and
it's just
fairly recently
ridiculous.
too, very recently from a geologic or
She's great,
you know,
man.
any other
Thanks,
time
buddy.
scale
We're
outside of,
like
you know,
almost
the
like
time,
4
the way
years
that we
together
measure
now.
time
Like
with our
3.5
short lives.
years. She's
But in the last
amazing.
30,000
I'm the
years,
luckiest
you know,
guy in the world,
the
man.
Earth has been through this cataclysm.
I'm
That's
the
probably one of the
luckiest
worst
guy in
things
the
that's happened
world.
to it in the last couple
And I
million
remember
years.
before
There was a
I
period of time
even
called the Younger Dryas.
met her, like
It
when
marked
we
the
first dated,
boundary
you were the
between
man that
Pleistocene
said,
and the
"Dude, get
Holocene,
off Tinder."
which is the era we're
And
in
I said I was
today.
banned.
It was people you can
How
think of as the
I'm
end of the Ice
still
Age.
banned on Tinder. Not that I've been
And it
on
was only
Tinder the last
30,000
4
years
years,
ago,
but
it was
like
there's a massive megafaunal extinction event. It would have been a
bars and like,
civilization
no,
ending
man,
event.
you gotta get off that.
During this period of time, sea levels
And
rose.
I'm like,
you know,
you're
400
right.
feet almost.
because
very short
I think I was still
time.
pretty
It
bitter
was
about it
just
because
a catastrophic event that
I
was
got
most likely
banned
caused by a
because
series of cosmic impacts and airbursts.
I
Particularly over the northern
'cause
hemisphere, and it would have ended
you
civilization.
just get
So,
ghosted.
you know,
Every
when you
single
look at it-
interaction
when you look at
is a
events
ghost.
like that are now being
Not that there's
revealed
many interactions,
through
but
modern science
every single
and
one.
new science,
It is not even like
in
after a meeting,
archaeology, but in
because of
astrophysics,
yeah.
paleoclimatology,
I called
ice
out,
cores,
I called out someone,
scientists are contributing
but
to
it's
this
like not
knowledge.
even after a meeting, just
It should have
talking.
this tremendous impact on
And
history because, you know, not only was there
just-
a megafauna,
I called them out. I
extinction
said,
event
"Oh,
where it would have
like,
ended any civilization."
I don't know what I
that was
said. I
around
said like,
during
oh,
that
like,
time.
are you
It
ghosting
actually
me? I don't know. It might have
corresponds
been
with almost
more
every
rude or
single
like,
ancient
oh,
origin
you're ghosting
story.
me or something like
Even
that,
our
right?
own,
Like,
even our own
just
modern day
fucking,
religions
it
and
had it.
origin stories
It
and
had
these
it.
tales that are passed down through
And I got banned.
generations and generations, and often are just rehashes and, you know, reimaginings of older tales that came from older
You're right,
civilizations, like the flood story, the Noah
funny.
flood story is often people know this comes from the Sumerians and the
But
epic of Gilgamesh.
I think that really
flood story.
what
If you
upsets
can't
me
look
is the
at
fact that
any ancient culture or religion and their
ghosting
origin
is
stories and not find
okay
it
and appreciated.
just to be not.
You're still
always
single. I
find
hear,
like
I
a
hear
great
what you're saying,
flood
man.
story
Yeah,
or a great fire
it's all
story,
good,
and
man.
this idea
Living
that, you know,
the diamond
mankind
life,
would
my
end,
dude.
Through some
You're a
giant
catch and a
cataclysm.
half, man.
And there was there were people that lived before that, but we went through this cataclysm and then we were sort of forced
I can
to start
imagine the
again.
ladies in LA,
And
man.
I
Oh my
think there's a
god,
grain of
man.
truth in that now that's being revealed by a lot of this modern science. And
I hear you, bro. That's smart.
for whatever reason, at this point, it's not really been acknowledged to any great degree by
Smart,
modern
dude.
archaeology and you know the
Safe,
keepers
too.
of the tomes of the history books at the universities. But I think it's only a matter of time.
But also the other thing is that when
Big
people think of like, oh, the
responsibility.
comet hit us and oh, it's a civilization ender, it wasn't the younger dryas. Again, to my rudimentary understanding of it, it was a huge event that took out a lot of humanity, but not all.
All right, let me just
of
watch it.
no.
Be right back.
No, we
And that's
survived it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's not like the dinosaurs. Like the dinosaurs were,
Right.
that's a planet killer. Whatever happened to them at that point, that was what I forgot how many millions of years ago.
65 million years ago.
Yeah, 65 million. That was a whole other conversation where it really just took over the planet and almost everything died. Almost.
Yes, yeah. So you have varying degrees of extinction level events. You know, either the KT boundary is the one that is often associated with the dinosaurs, and it is 6. That people think of that when they think of extinction level events, and no doubt that was a much bigger event than the Younger Dryas. And you have even bigger ones that go back in the past where you're talking about like 99% of all life basically being exterminated on the planet. And that's crazy. I mean, you end up with just a few microbes and bacteria, and then everything has to start again from that perspective. That's happened.
And New York roaches. And
roaches, of course. Yeah. Yep. Yes.
New York roaches specifically.
Specifically, those things probably were fine. They might have thrived in that environment. But yeah, I mean, the Younger Dryas, look, it was, as I said, probably the worst thing to happen to the planet in the last sort of 2 to 5 million years. It was a big event. And if you look at what happened, I mean, it wiped out essentially half of the megafauna that was here at the time. So people, I think a lot of people aren't aware of these extinction events, but people are generally aware of things like, you know, mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and, you know, the American...
The giant bear. Yeah, the giant bear.
The short-faced bear. There was the American cave bear, the American lion. There were armadillos the size of Volkswagens. There was the giant ground sloth that was almost the size of an elephant. These are all animals that existed in North America from basically from 2.5 million years ago up until about 13,000, 12,000 years ago, and they all went away. And if you look at the total of extinction of species that went extinct in this short period of time, it's a roughly half of the megafauna. Megafauna being anything that's, I think, over about 40 kilograms of body weight, including us, I guess. Certainly me. That's described as megafauna. So half of those species that were around went extinct in this pretty short period of time, right down to and including a couple of species of birds. And of course, the mainstream explanation for this is kind of this nonsensical thing that has to do with overhunting with by humans, and it really is nonsense. If you look at South America, for example, they lost something like 85% of their megafauna. North America is a similar number. Like, it's huge numbers of species went extinct in this real short period of time. So it was a catastrophic event. It was in various places. You had just incredible flooding. and also incredible fire. There's been tons of different levels of analysis. There's now more than like 150 peer-reviewed scientific papers that really deal with the nuance and the detail of what is all of the evidence for this period of time. It has a lot to do with analysis of things like ice core samples, where we can drill down into the ice in places like Antarctica and Greenland and in Russia and places, because every year as the snow falls, it gets compressed into ice, and it contains data about things like oxygen isotopes. We can look at temperatures and particulate matter, and we're getting very good at like drilling down, taking these cores out that go back in some cases hundreds of thousands of years, and we can look at almost like a year by year layer of what were the conditions, what happened.
Like tree rings, like tree rings almost.
Exactly, yeah. In fact, tree rings are another. We don't really have tree rings that go back 13,000 years, but tree rings have told us some interesting things about the climate in history as well, CO2 stuff like that. But if you go back down, so one of the interesting things that happened, it's not just you don't just get these massive floods, because what likely happened, during this period of time, sea levels rose 300 to 400 feet, like 100 meters, 130 meters, in a short period of time, and it's associated with these massive pulses, these meltwater pulses. And of course, that's all of the ice that was on top of particularly the northern hemisphere being melted quite rapidly and finding its way into the ocean. And that's the trigger for it. So you have these impacts and these airbursts that are probably going into the ice. These ice caps, the Laurentide and Cordilleran glacier systems that were pretty much over most of North America, also the European glacier as well. And these things are melting rapidly, tremendous flooding.
Hell yeah, dude.
You also have, just these airbursts and impacts are like... They're much stronger events than even giant volcanoes going off. Like it would cause almost like a nuclear winter environment on the planet. And in fact, we see this with temperature analysis. There's like an 800-900 year period
it can't just jump into like some crazy
12,800 years to about 11,600 years ago, where the temperature just drops it drops dramatically and quickly to like this the depth of the coldest parts of an ice age. And it stays there for about this 800-year period, and then it just gets jolted back out again. So the modern thinking is that there were two events. There was an event that precipitated this at the start at 11,800 or 900 years ago, and then something at around 11,600 years ago, which is particularly interesting because that's the date that coincides exactly with Plato's account of the sinking of Atlantis. Like that's a really interesting correlation with that date. But it's not, look, it's not just flooding. I mean, part of that ice core analysis also shows that at one point around 9% of the world's biomass was on fire, which is just an astronomical number.
A lot of CO2 as well coming out.
Well, it's just pouring it. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge fire. I mean, look, this is what you would call real climate change. Like this stuff that happened 14,000 years ago. This is real climate change. This is catastrophic and rapid climate change. It's not a runaway event. Like the Earth is very resilient to these shifts, but it's pretty rough on the life. Like what happens? So either you don't get like life doesn't go extinct immediately because it's like under the blast like that. There's evidence for that too. It's really interesting actually. There's these different places where mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and trees and everything just like mashed up together, where you've got like mammoth hip bones up near their head. I mean, it's just, you can tell these things were hit by a shockwave. But what happens ultimately is that you have this dramatic and rapid climate change that affects the environment the megafauna lives in, and of course that's what causes that extinction. It's this rapid change to their environment and their food sources that all goes away and they go extinct in short order. And we've seen the result of that. Like Siberia, for example, was during this, what you call in the Pleistocene was much warmer than it is now. Like Siberia is this tundra, cold wasteland, like this almost this frozen landscape, but we have examples of megafauna and the mammoths and mastodons that live there that show that their diets were it was huge plants and a green place. Like the climate was very different during the Pleistocene. Generally colder overall, but the climate zones on the planet were very different, and those shifted rapidly as a result of the underdry ice.
And aren't they finding now bones and animals who like were frozen and now they're being defrosted because of the climate change that's happening currently? And they're finding them like with food in their mouth and like food in their stomach. So it was like a quick scenario. They froze like in almost flash freezing in many
some
cases.
places. Sure, yeah. In some places, it's really interesting. Like there's the guys up in Alaska. There was a really interesting, I forget his name, John someone or other, went on Rogan's show. In fact, I've kind of had some halfway contact when he knows Randall Carlson. I know Randall Carlson. There's been some talk about getting up to this Alaskan boneyard. I mean, these guys, they're literally finding just everywhere these mammoth remains and skeletons and flash frozen where you literally have meat. I think the guy's actually eaten some mammoth meat, like this it's like been frozen for 12 or 13,000 years, and they've cooked it up and ate it at one point. I'm like, holy crap, that's a brave move. But
I was gonna say that's not the smartest situation.
No, that's what you do, I guess.
In Alaska, right?
In Alaska. But yeah, there are examples where you have like flesh. You have these animals that are almost intact, like baby mammoths with food in their stomach. I mean, and food in their mouth even. So they were killed very quickly and then frozen very quickly as well. So I imagine there are some scenarios and results of this just catastrophic events where you have this kind of massive polar vortex that can happen. I'm not that familiar with that. It's obviously not everywhere, but certainly in some places, as a result of this, just. I mean, we have nothing in even the movies that try to simulate this stuff don't really do it justice. And you can get a sense for that when you look at things like the floods and what happened. If you ever go out to eastern Washington State, there's an area of eastern Washington State called the Channeled Scablands, and it's probably one of the most spectacular environments you'll ever see, because it is literally where the ground and the earth was just tore up, because that was the path that these floodwaters took. And you're talking about volumes of water, like 9 cubic miles of water per minute flowing through some of these environments. That's like, put it this way, it's about 100 times the volume of all the rivers on earth flowing right now. Like all of the flowing water on earth right now, you're talking about 100 times the volume of that was at the peak discharge rates of some of these floods. And so in a couple of weeks, essentially, some of these events have carved these coulees that are miles and miles wide, and they're like 1,000-foot deep, and they just rip up this basalt, and they just form these huge scars that are on the landscape. And today we drive through them. They've got these little lakes and stuff. It's all the recreation area, golf courses. Super spectacular environment. But when you look at it through the context of how did this form and when did it form and how quickly did this happen, you just stand back. This is something else. Like this is, I mean, it was catastrophic, and we've never experienced anything like it. Certainly not in our modern memory.
So with the sites that are being discovered now, in your opinion, were there any archaeological sites that we currently that have excavated that were around prior to the Younger Dryas?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the stuff in Turkey right now, Göbekli Tepe is probably the best example. Right. In fact, some of that goes back to during the Younger Dryas. Like literally, the carbon dating puts those sites in place during the period of the Younger Dryas. Wow. And in fact, Karahan Tepe and some of the other sites they're discovering in Turkey are actually older than Göbekli Tepe. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about Göbekli Tepe too is, and in fact, I can give a plug to like the Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Good friends of mine, they just put out an excellent video on YouTube about Göbekli Tepe that gets into the details of how they've done the dating there, because people kind of know that, Göbekli Tepe is carbon dated and pretty much established around that 11,000 years, 11,000 years ago, 9,000 to 10,000 BC. What's interesting about the dating there is that dating comes from material that are in these rough walls that are around those classic sort of T-pillared shapes, these big megaliths. And if you look at the site, what seems to have happened there is that those walls were built to repair that site. Those walls were made because they encompass some of these T-pillars. They actually cover up features of the T-pillars. It's almost like they were restoring and protecting something that was there beforehand. And all of the dating material and the dates come from this very rough and primitive, cobblestone wall that is built around these enclosures. And it's an entirely different style to the T-pillars and the megalithic work, and in fact, I think that's a good indicator that this was probably a later period of occupation and building that happened there, which tells you that these T-pillars and these original enclosures, and there's the more sophisticated work, the stuff that is like, you know, the 20-foot high megaliths, and some of them weighing 20 or 30 tons, was done at some unknown time before that, and probably fell into disrepair and had fallen over. And then during the Younger Dryas, you had a primitive set of people, Neolithic people, or I guess at that point it was Paleolithic or even Mesolithic, that came there and restored those sites and worked on them and did something to them, and that's where the dating comes from. And in fact, this evidence is backed up by the fact that in some of these walls that are built around these T-pillars, you actually have broken pieces of T-pillars being used as blocks in the wall. So it's as if those T-pillars were already broken, they'd fallen over and, you know, degraded, and then because they couldn't put it back together, they took that lump of stone, they put it in the wall when they built the wall. So it's like, people think it's and it is an old site, but it seems like it could be far older than that. We really don't know. I think it's a similar case for places like Egypt. I do think that some of those places which we attribute to the dynastic Egyptian civilization today, places like Giza, Saqqara, Abu Sir, you know, Dashur, I think there's a very good chance that elements of that infrastructure existed during the Younger Dryas, if not before, and then it was later occupied and reused and integrated into the dynastic Egyptian culture as we know it.
Do you think that the pyramids themselves, it seems like that there was a kind of a pillaging of, like, let's say the Great Pyramids, of all three of them, of elements to build other things throughout history. But to be honest, if you just come across that thing and you're primitive, like, there's only so much you can do. Like, you can't move those things, lift those things, work those things. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why they're still in the shape that they're in, because it was just such a massive. I mean, these blocks are how big each?
Well,
and
I mean,
there's 2 million of them.
I mean, they're not. I mean, there's certainly bigger blocks of material. If you take the Great Pyramid, for example, it's something like 6 million tons of limestone in that, and 2.5 to 3 million blocks. So the average block size is around 2 to 3 tons, something like that. Which is a lot. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. But you have much bigger stones. Obviously, you have like 70, 80 ton single piece granite stones and like dozens and dozens of them that make up the central granite structure inside the pyramid. And this, you got to remember, this is also like 150 feet above ground level. Like there's dozens of these massive granite ashlars and beams, 70, 80 tons a pop. I mean, you've got foundation tiles around. People often, I love taking people to Gyges because people go there and they look up at the pyramid, but one of the more interesting elements of it is actually looking down at what you're standing on, because it's not just bedrock. There was preparation work done into the bedrock, and there's actually foundation tiles locked together and locked into the bedrock in this 3D geometric puzzle almost that is just perfectly fit together. And some of those stones, you're talking 200 plus tons, single piece stones that were put in there and shaped and placed extremely precisely. In fact, I'm working on a video right now about probably what I think is the largest single piece stone that is at Giza that we found only recently. That's around 450 tons. It's kind of insane to think of somebody moving those things around. But yeah, the pyramids have been pillaged and used as quarries for stone for literally thousands of years. This is an activity that began, as far as we know, in the Middle and New Kingdom of the ancient Egyptian civilization itself. So you're talking about like 1500 BC, they were already taking stone from these monuments, and that has been an activity that has continued right up until about probably only 60, 70 years ago. Not even that long ago. I mean, it's been well reported by guys like Flinders Petrie, who visited these sites in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that there's just camel trains of stone leaving these sites every day, which should tell you something, like this, because that's how massive and how giant they are, is that people have been taking stone and using these things as quarries for literally thousands of years. Yet and taking something away and destroying it's much easier than building it. But the claim is that you could build the Great Pyramid inside of 25 years with nothing more than Bronze Age technology, human horsepower, ropes, and sleds. And it's absolutely nonsense from a logistical perspective. It's one of the biggest problems I have with I guess, the orthodox story, particularly dynastic Egyptian history, is that not only are they saying you could build this thing in this short amount of time, which if you take 25 years as an example, and the number of stones that are in the Great Pyramid, that equates to one stone being quarried, shipped, finished, taken to the site, put in place, and perfectly set every 5 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 25 years. That's what it would take to finish
perfectly
that.
And perfect precision, like almost.
Well,
perfect
yeah,
precision.
I mean, yes and no. There is mortar. I mean, the superstructure of the pyramid isn't as precise as, say, the foundation. It's certainly not as precise as the internal work. But that figure of 5 minutes doesn't account for the planning. It doesn't account for the foundation work. It doesn't account for all of the leveling and the tiles that go into it. It doesn't account for the sophistication of the interior spaces, the digging of the tunnels. Like, it's real nonsense. It's complete nonsense. And not only that, you have to also remember that these are supposedly amongst the very first pyramids ever built. It's like it's like we started with the space shuttle and we went backwards to, like, the horse and cart, because you don't start with the perfect sort of massive sort of technologically sophisticated product and then go backwards, which is what seems to have happened in the orthodox timeline of pyramid building, because the Egyptians, we all know about the Giza and the Great Pyramid and the 2 or 3 other pyramids that are there. But as you go forward in time, like, the Middle Kingdom, they kept building pyramids, but they got much less sophisticated. They were made from mud brick, and they were much smaller, and there's still some of you can see today, but they're slowly eroding because mud brick erodes. But yet these giant stone monuments are eternal, and they're supposedly the first ones we made. And of course, there's endless precision when it comes. There's precision when you look at, like, how these things are aligned to true north. So it's one of the most accurately aligned and set out buildings that we've ever made. In fact, we didn't even match it, I think, until the late 1800s. We actually could build something that was actually almost as accurate as the pyramid. It encodes all this data. It encodes. It's basically a scale model of the northern hemisphere of the planet. To a ratio of, I think it's, I'm going to get this wrong, it's 43,200. So if you take the height of the pyramid and you multiply it by 43,200, you get the polar radius of the Earth, so from the center of the Earth to the North Pole. If you take the perimeter length of the Great Pyramid and you multiply it by 43,200, you get the equatorial circumference of the planet. It encodes the shape of the planet, the fact that it's an oblate spheroid. So by that I mean that the planet Earth's not a sphere, right? It's like a little further east-west than it is north-south, right? Because of the spinning. So it's oblate.
Slightly eggy.
Well, it's just slightly flat on top, a little fatter around the middle.
Yeah.
And that difference, like, that translates into a ratio of difference between latitude and longitude. So if you draw that grid line across the map and you go down and you look at, like, okay, at the equator, I've got one grid square of whatever, 1 degree or 1 minute of latitude and longitude. It's slightly longer east-west than it is north-south. It's not a square, it's a rectangle. So that ratio between latitude and longitude is also exactly replicated, or very precisely replicated, in the Great Pyramid. It sits on something called a socle, which is this 1 cubit wide and high platform almost. So it's like this little ledge that it sits on and sticks out. And it gives you 2 ways of measuring the perimeter length, right? You can measure the perimeter length of the actual pyramid or the perimeter length of the socle. And if you compare the ratio of those 2 lengths between the socle and the pyramid,
look at that start. Come on,
it's exactly the same ratio as latitude to longitude on the planet. It's bananas.
And so then why? So then how? So when mainstream archaeology is confronted with these facts, what do they say? Oops.
Well, the answer is it's coincidence. I mean, that's generally the response you get. Is it's coincidence, and I think these things.
Why would they give me? Come on.
Many more things you could talk about when it comes to precision and aspects of the Great Pyramid, and I think all of them. I mean, it doesn't take very many of them to go, okay, that's not coincidence. There's obviously some more data going on here. I think it's one of the giant contradictions. It doesn't really get addressed, unfortunately. I think there's another explanation for this. I think I genuinely, and I respect the dynastic Egyptians. They did tremendous work. I mean, they were extremely capable civilization. They lasted for 3,000 years. It was an incredible, probably one of the greatest civilizations to have ever been on the planet. but they simply weren't capable and didn't have the knowledge set of achieving some of the things that we attribute to them. For all of their capability, we know that particularly the Old Kingdom period.
I'm literally the worst
relatively primitive Bronze Age
GoldenEye player in the world.
No use
that
of
was
the wheel.
terrible. The right strafe, I might ditch the right strafe, honestly.
Copper,
Left strafe is so much just better.
So with no use of the wheel, there's no pulleys, there's no force multipliers, there's no advanced tools, there's no pottery wheel, there's no lathe, there's no nothing. But we have these incredible artifacts and architecture that comes from that period that show all of this sophistication and all of this encoded data, and nobody's ever demonstrated that you can actually replicate that stuff with this primitive, with these very primitive methods of construction. Nor do we have any evidence that the Egyptians actually had the data that it seems like are encoded in these artifacts. So you're left, I think, with two options, and this is, you could spend hours talking about this stuff, the weight of evidence that suggests this. But I think you're ultimately left with two options. One is we have to drastically reevaluate what we think that the dynastic Egyptians were capable of. I think that's by far the least likely option. There's no evidence to suggest that they had advanced tools, that they had advanced knowledge. We know what they knew. Like, they wrote down what they did. They drew scenes on the walls showing how they did things, and we found their tools that are very primitive. The other option, I think, the one that the evidence supports best, and I think all of the adjacent evidence, cataclysm, genetics, timeline, is that the path of civilization is much longer. There's just more ups and downs, more cataclysm, and that's at some point in the past there was a much more advanced civilization that existed, that is probably responsible for this knowledge, that probably started these projects even if they didn't finish them, and that probably manufactured a lot of the things that the Egyptians then later inherited and integrated into their own culture over a period of thousands of years. And this originating civilization, this progenitor civilization, was probably one that spanned the globe, that was highly capable, because we see evidence for it in Turkey, in Lebanon, in South America, in Easter Island, potentially in China. All around the world you have these similar styles of megalithic building. You have a pyramid building culture. You have the works of people like George von Deschund and de Santilla, who wrote Hamlet's Mill, that show that there's astronomical knowledge encoded in all of these cultures all around the world that reflects a knowledge set that those cultures didn't have. But it does show you things like precession of the equinoxes, these sophisticated movements of the heavens, and it all points to this idea that maybe there was a precursor culture that might have been responsible for that initial set of knowledge that is then spanned out through time and distance and ends up in all these other cultures. There's so much evidence for this, I think. And of course the Atlantis story with Plato, stuff like that. So I think that's the far more likely scenario. I think that's the one that the evidence best supports. And it's just, it's a battle to kind of get the mainstream academic community to kind of look at the past with a bit more of an open mind, because I think if we did that, and we looked at these sites and we analysed these artifacts and we used our own technology, we could probably learn something. We'd probably open up these doors. We'd learn a lot more about our origins and the history of civilization.
Do you think that when we say when you start hearing the word, there was an advanced civilization in the past, it's, first of all, the ego of the current man or the current human doesn't allow that, because, and this is the one thing I think you would agree with me on, at every moment in time, man has always thought that they had everything figured out. Every year that goes by, they're just like, nope, it's Zeus, that's the way it goes. Nope, it's the god Ra. All these kind of things. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why we can't comprehend it. But also, I think we're looking at the past through the lens of our technology today, but the ancient civilizations that you're talking about that might be more advanced, they could have been advanced in ways that we can't really comprehend, because it's a different kind of technology than we are currently using.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I talk about this quite a bit. I think it's a difficult concept to grasp if you haven't thought much about it before. But I think that's exactly right. I think all you have to do is look at the last 30, 40 years of our own technological progression, the rise of the internet, the rise of devices, and think, okay, so, we didn't, if you go back in time, you could only have to go back 30 or 40 years to to
our lifetime. In our lifetime.
Yeah, in our lifetime, for people not to have a clue what a cell phone is, like a modern smartphone, touch screen, internet, all that stuff. These are new concepts. You know, I like to illustrate it by saying, yeah, if you don't have to go back to cave, but say you took this back to Neolithic times, like cavemen, let alone Victorian era or even 100 years ago, and you show this to like a phone to someone, they're gonna look at it and go, well, it's like a shiny piece of glass or something that breaks if you smash it. It's powered off, like it doesn't do anything. You have no context to understand what it is. But you and I couldn't build one, but we know what it is.
It works. Yeah, we know how it works.
We know what it is, like, because we have context. We know what what wireless networking is. We know what a touchscreen is. We know what the cameras and the internet and all these things that you need to put this thing into context and understand what it is. And in a lot of ways, I think when we look at the potential sophistication of some of these sites, I think we're in that same position as someone from Victorian era looking at a cell phone. We don't have the context to fully understand it because there may well be parts of science or technologies that were involved in what these sites, how they were made or what they were doing that we don't understand yet. And as you said, even though we think we've got it all figured out, we know that we're going to know more in 10 years. We're going to explore the boundaries of science and learn more about the fundamental nature of reality and technology and the principles of the universe in 20 years, 100 years, 1,000 years.
We're just pumping out runs, though. We got good consistency going.
Probably huge domains of technology and science that are currently outside of our own perspective. And it's very tempting, and a lot of people do when they look back at the past. As you said, they look at it through the lens of our current understanding of technology.
I thought he was going to be more to the left.
It's as if everything in the past, we're the most superior man that has ever, version of man that's ever existed, right? So therefore, everything in the past must be just a subset of what we know. And it's all explainable, and it can only be explainable within the context of what we know. And I just don't think that's the best way to look at it. I think we need to be a lot more open-minded about the possibilities of what was going on in the past, and consider the possibility that some of those answers might lay outside of our current perspective and our current knowledge set. And that's why I think also if we actually investigate them with that possibility in mind, and we apply ourselves and apply our technology, we might actually learn something. Cool. And we're starting to see that with some of the work that's been happening this year that I've been involved in, this in-depth analysis of these pre-dynastic granite vases, and they're just showing these degrees of sophistication and machining and precision that it's completely really blowing people's minds all around the world. Like it's certainly not possible to have been done by hand, and it's revealing all of these interesting possibilities about their function or how they were made, and we're learning stuff because we're being open-minded about how investigating these things and what the possibilities could be.
And it's stuff I've seen in Egypt too, where there's these quarries where there were obelisks left behind.
Are you fucking serious right now?
Unfinished.
Is this real life?
They were started to be carved out, and even
oh my
even
god,
like hieroglyphs were on them, but they're being almost scooped out of the ground with their scoop marks, and people are like, how do they do it? And there's even cuts, like a laser cut or a saw of some sort was cutting through it and stopped, and then like, oops, made a bad cut, went back, and you could see that they're like, how do you work with some of the toughest, the densest materials on the planet?
Yeah, I mean, granite
hardness. Yeah, exactly. So hard that's not harder than diamonds, but it's up there with diamonds. It's insane.
Well, yeah, so that's one of the interesting things about a lot of the artifacts, particularly in Egypt, although this also applies to South America, is that they use some of the most difficult stones, most intractable mediums, if you like, that are available. I mean, on the most scale of hardness, your fingernail's like a 2.5, and copper is like a 3.5, irons 4.5, steel's 5, 5.5. You have stones that are in the 6, 7, 8, 9 range. That are being used and just seem to be no problem in terms of how they're machining. Diamonds are 10, diamond being sort of the toughest stuff out there. Although I think that's all that, they might have synthesized something these days that could be harder than diamond. I don't know. But yeah, you have all sorts of evidence. Okay, there's machining evidence, like you said, there's saw cuts, there's tubular drills, there's evidence for very sophisticated forms of machining that has never been replicated by any hand method, which is what they say did all of this stuff. You have the scoop marks in the quarries, which is really interesting. And I have a long investigation, a few videos looking at it on my channel. It's that stuff is, the conventional explanation for it is, well, it's pounding stones. Is that they took these diorite or dolerite balls and they just pounded away at the granite, and it's what leaves these scoop marks. And there's all sorts of problems with that theory. Not the least of which is that I think and this is like a logical conundrum that you see all over the place in the Orthodox story of ancient Egypt, but it's like, well, okay, this is the most primitive method, yet this is the method you see on the most sophisticated and largest artifacts. It's like, how can you correlate these two things? Like, if this is the most primitive method of quarrying, literally pounding on granite with another rock. Mm-hmm. And of course, you do progress over time to, well, we do the wedge and chisel approach where we chisel out divots in a line and we put wood in and water it and then hammer in these chisels, try to split the stone, and then you develop stronger materials like steel and other chisels where you can actually chisel in to the stone. And there's evidence for that sort of work too in that quarry. But they're typically they're getting off little small pieces off these giant artifacts like the unfinished obelisk, which is 1,200 tons, 1,200 tons is the estimate for its mass. But it's also, they try to explain that with the most primitive quarrying method. It's nonsense. Plus, there's all sorts of other inconsistencies with how those scoop marks are formed. The fact that they run all the way down walls in a straight line and underneath and then up under the underside of these artifacts. And you wouldn't have these ridge lines in between the scoop marks. I mean, if you have a shift change and the next guy comes along after 10 hours of pounding, and he picks up the ball and he starts pounding, he's going to pound down those ridges that are in between these scoop marks. I mean, that's where you're going to get the most traction and remove the most material, but that's not what we see. We see everything in these straight lines as if there was a tool that came down and did this in a straight line. We see evidence for articulation, like they start straight in places and they angle over. So you can imagine using like a backhoe arm. Everyone who's used a backhoe will see this. When you cut out straight, it's straight, but as you rotate,
we're so close. Like we're freaking
line that you're cutting.
Few frames
we see
away.
For exactly
like,
that same sort of thing. In these scoop marks, that the angle changes as if that tool was fixed in a certain spot, and then it was operating from there and was articulated, and then it was moved later.
You know what I did?
There's all these down more. It's very interesting.
I look down way more.
It goes on and on and on.
I think
there's a question I want to ask you, because I've been down to South America. I've been to Machu Picchu. Mm-hmm. I've been to Machu Picchu, Tulum, Coba, and you start looking at those structures, and they have echoes of ancient Egypt, no question. Which also, that's another question: why are there so many pyramids around the world where these civilizations should have never ever had some sort of communication? So there's that one big giant question. But there's some of these South American, I think in Machu Picchu, yeah, in Machu Picchu, I would say Chichen Itza, and Machu Picchu, where the stones almost look like they're out of molds. Because they are so, it's not like one block on one block. Like in Egypt, you have granite stone, and they're all similar shapes, if not almost exactly the same, give or take. But this is like apple, orange, banana, and they all seem to fit perfectly, so perfectly together, like they're puzzle pieces. You can't even stick a piece of paper in between it. How in God's green earth did they do that back then, man?
That is a very good question, and it's one I don't have an answer for, because I'm as mystified by this as you are. You see with the megalithic work, I think this is one of the indicators of this sophistication, and you see a similar thing between Egypt and places like Peru, in the precision of the work. So in Egypt, you have a lot more straight lines and this almost linear megalithic work. Like you say, these are square. A lot of stuff is pretty square and certainly straight in the joinery, but very precise. Sometimes you can't see it. You certainly can't fit a razor blade in between it. You see the same type of precision in Peru and this work, in the Sacred Valley and at Machu Picchu, but there's no straight lines there. Like it's literally these curved features, and it's one of the mystifying things to me is like how, you've got these giant stones. There's a place called Sacsayhuaman just above Cusco, and you have some of these stones that are 150, 200 tons each. These giant hard forms of limestone. You have granite stones that are in the streets of Cusco that are multi-ton stones as well, and they just are joined together perfectly. But they have these flowing joins where it's just this
Dr. Seuss, almost Dr. Seuss style.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's not. And I've seen in some places, I've actually documented this a few times, where through earthquakes or other processes the stones have separated, and you can tell. Okay, they didn't just make them look good on the surface, like as if they were touching on the surface. That consistent joined surface actually goes the full depth of the stone. It goes all the way through that depth, which is incredibly difficult to make those mating surfaces match like that. So a lot of people speculate, okay, well these stones come out of a mold. Are they somehow like a Play-Doh or a toffee-like substance that is put in place and then it sets? We don't really have any evidence for that. We don't have any process that can explain that. Intuition tells you that. You look at it and go, man, because the only other idea is, well, that somehow they're lifting the stone, they're looking at it and they're just shaving a bit off it and they're working on it and then they put it back. Okay, it's not quite ready, and then you're just back and forth and you have to put it in and out 1,000 times to get it even close.
And how heavy are these stones?
Well, some of these stones are a couple hundred tons. I mean, it's actually right. They are. They're massive. And certainly multi-ton tones. None of this is easy. It's really funny actually. You go to Egypt and South America, and they're restoring a lot of these sites like Karnak, and there's literally a 2 or 3 ton piece of a statue that they will lift it. They had to move at Egypt, and you can see how difficult that is. How much they had to wrap it in these massive, big, strong cables, and then the winch and the machine they needed to lift it and stuff. It's just it gives you an idea that it's difficult for us to do today. A lot of this work, but it seems to have been just much easier for people in the past because they did it endlessly. South America, Egypt, whatever. And it's just, people have very little appreciation for just how difficult some of these tasks are because they haven't done it themselves or they haven't seen how difficult it is for us to do and move things around like that are, multi-ton objects. And funny shapes and stuff. It's crazy. But yeah, I don't know. The South American stuff is fantastic. There is a crossover there. So you do get, in some places in Egypt, you have some of these flowing lines in some places. And in some places in South America, you have straight lines and more linear lines.
Yeah, Chichen Itza's pretty, to my recollection of it, it's pretty, all the blocks are similar sides. They're not all crazy.
Not flowing, yeah. Well, I mean, the Coricancha in Peru, the Cusco, is this giant megalithic structure that's of course, it's a Catholic church today, but it's in the center of Cusco. And its origins are megalithic, 100%, but it's much more straight. There's a lot of straight lines in there. In terms, it's very, very similar to Egypt. But then you go into the streets of Cusco, and they have these megalithic buildings, and there's these flowing lines, these green granite walls. Just insane. It's just beautiful. Cusco is such an amazing place. If people haven't been, you should go because it's super unique. There's literally nowhere else in the world that I know of where you have these architectural styles stacked up on each other like this. You have megalithic, which we don't know how old this is. I think it all gets attributed to the Inca in the mainstream story. I think this is far older than that because you have the megalithic style. Then you have Inca building, which is very rough and very primitive, like local small cobbles and mud mortar and things. Then you have colonial Spanish on top of that. Then you have modern. And you just walk around the streets in the center of Cusco, and it's just all stacked up on top of each other everywhere you look. It's unique and it's amazing.
Have you ever heard of Coral Castle?
Yes, I have.
So have you been to Coral Castle?
I have not.
So I'm from South Florida, so I've been there multiple times. And for everyone who doesn't know about Coral Castle, please Google Coral Castle in South Florida because it is megalithic construction in the 50s.
Yeah, Edward Leeds Garland.
That's right. Yeah, that was his name. Yes, and he was moving around coral rocks.
Yeah, it's a limestone. It's a form of limestone.
Yeah, and it's everywhere down in South. I mean, that's why Coral Gables is called Coral Gables. Is because it was built on the foundation of these rocks. But he built an entire town, like a little town, and giant table, 2-story buildings, and a 5-ton door that was perfectly aligned.
Yeah.
So he could. All you have to do with one finger, you can move it. And he said when people and he did it by himself.
Yeah, he's a very secretive guy. Yeah.
And he said, "How do you do it?" He goes, "I learned the secrets of how they built the pyramids." That's all he would say.
Yeah. Well, I have a different opinion on Coral Castle. It is. Look, and that was one thing I would say about this. It is. Leith Scarlin was, I mean, a savant in this space. Like he spent, and it was his life's work. Like obviously his passion. And it's a tremendous achievement any way you cut it. However, there is footage that's emerged, I think, in the last few years that I've seen of him using. Block and tackles and massive A-frames, which have no problem lifting the sort of weights that we're talking about. I don't think it's as mysterious as some people put it. That's all I'd say about it. I don't want to take away from the achievement. It's an incredible achievement.
Right.
But I don't think it's this, like people show pictures of his workshop and think he was using some sort of magical Tesla energy and all this other stuff. I don't think that's what's going on. I think he was very dedicated, very hardworking, very secretive and enigmatic in his answers and how he did stuff. But there is some footage you can see him using kind of modern materials and tools to do it. But you know, it's a lifetime of work, and he's very skilled. And I mean, I do want to go see it at some point. I've not had the chance.
But we can do that.
It's pretty remarkable. It's a pretty remarkable.
That's my opinion on it.
Yeah.
It's very remarkable. It's remarkable, but I don't think it's like. I don't think it's as mysterious as some people make it out to be. Yeah.
Right, and I'd have to agree with you on it. I think when you're there and you start looking at things, and maybe your trained eye would look at it a little bit differently than mine, but I was there. I've been there probably half a dozen times in my life, and I've really just been I mean, you're fascinated with it when you're there, but when you see the construction of some stuff that he was able to do, I mean, there's a castle, like there's like a 2-story castle that he carved out or did something with. Every hurricane that's hit Florida.
Oh, that's not going anywhere. Yeah.
It does nothing. Like category 6, it doesn't matter. It just sits there and it doesn't even think about it.
Well, that's the reason. That's the reason why. I mean, that people say, "Why didn't they pyramids? Don't they build stuff out of other materials?" I'm like, well, if you want something to last, make it out of stone.
Hard stone. On top of that, hard stone that's not gonna wear down in 5 years. Yeah, that's the other thing. Like a lot of the stuff that we have built today. I mean, if we left the Earth today, if we just, for whatever reason, humans just left the Earth today, what do we got, 1,000 years maybe before everything starts turning to dust?
Couple thousand. Give it a couple thousand years. It's nothing.
Yeah, like I mean, the nature will take it over. There was a show. I don't know if you ever saw this show on History Channel. You know what I'm talking about? Like if people left, and they would just they would just take a new city around the world in the episode and just say, after 500 years, after 1,000 years. The one that really got me, the structure that we have built, humans have built, that will last the longest before it goes, is the Hoover Dam.
Yeah.
And I was just at the Hoover Dam like a few weeks ago and you sit there and going, oh wow, the last place to lose power will be Vegas.
Because of the hydroelectric.
Until they finally cracked them. So without maintenance, they'll eventually pop.
Yeah.
But the machine itself, they said it would take hundreds, if not a long time before it actually breaks.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, right? I love that theory. Like, so say we have a civilization end and we go away, like you said. I mean, metal and cities, that's all gone. Within 1,000, 2,000, no problem. Like nothing remains.
Without a cataclysm. Without a cataclysm,
just assuming we just leave. Yeah. And all the people are gone. Yeah, it's done. And then you have the Hoover Dam. I mean, you've got Mount Rushmore that would erode eventually, but people might see that in thousands of years in the future and go, because I think it's granite. You know, they're looking at it and going, oh man, these are the gods or whatever.
The gods
on this carved into this mountain. You know, you've got. I love this idea, like the Hoover Dam, and then you'd have some trace of like the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal.
Yeah, there'll be little things left. Yeah.
Well, those are huge construction projects. I think I can imagine an argument in the future. Like imagine, we go thousands of years past, some other civilization they arise, and they have their archaeologists, and they're digging up the bones of our civilization. There's probably a bunch of people on whatever the version of the internet is the future making this case that these people were advanced. They dug a trench between the oceans, and then you've got all the mainstream archaeology going, no, this is just natural. This is nothing.
and
people on the internet going, no, the evidence is there. Look at it. Like this is a straight line between these.
And then they look at Mount Rushmore, and you barely can see the features, but there's something there that looks like a human face. It's like, obviously that's not natural. No, that's natural.
Yeah.
Well,
the Hoover Dam's just like a ceremonial space. It was, they built this, but it was just so they could worship their gods and they could stand on it and see the stars. Like, that's why they made that. It wasn't technological at all. No, it had no function because they were just basic, simple people.
Simple, but what's really fascinating about this conversation right now is if you start looking at the lens of how another civilization would look at our civilization and argue about things that for you and I are just like, no, that's obviously the Hoover Dam. Obviously, this is a phone. Obviously, because we have context.
That's right.
But you bring a native from the Amazon who's never seen a white man before, and you throw them into Vegas, they're going to be like, what? Like they wouldn't even.
Planet.
It's essentially another planet. So it's all about context.
Yeah, I mean, look, even if we survive, like you say, we have a cataclysm, but it's a civilization-ending cataclysm. We are blasted back to the Stone Age, which is what I think happened to us in the past. Graham Hancock calls us a species with amnesia, and it's a great term because we have these echoes of the past that come down through these origin stories and these tales and these myths and legends. But say we do survive this, but we're knocked back into basically a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Within a couple generations, things like plasma TVs and cell phones are going to be these campfire stories. They're going to, you might find that people have this memory of it, so they find black rocks. Maybe they get themselves some obsidian. They polish it up and they shape it up to look kind of like this, and they dance around the fire with it and try to activate it through ceremony and ritual. And I genuinely think that's a lot of what's happened when we look at dynastic Egypt. I think they inherited stuff like that. They probably had a cultural connection to the precursor civilization. They got a lot from them. They got knowledge and information, but they just didn't have any capability to use it or the context to understand it. So it all became ceremonial. Like these sites became ceremonial sites. In the same way that we might go into the cities if we were hunter-gatherers, all the Hoover Dam, places like that, and start to worship them. And then, as we grow and the kings and our warlords and our people emerge, like, I'm going to write my name on this. This is mine now. Like this is my site, and my name's on this now, and so therefore I made it. And thousands of years later, that's how we'd look at it and say, well, that guy's name's on it. He must have built it. It must have been made for him, and that's exactly what we do. That's exactly because we look at the ruins and the megaliths of the past and these statues and stuff. I mean, if there's a dude's name on it, like then he had it built for sure. He had it built. That's how Egyptology works. That's the name. And there's lots of contradictions there too. Like some artifacts have 3 or 4 or 5 different names on them. Because
every time a new guy came up, he's like, "Oh, that's mine. I did that."
Yeah, Ramses II is notorious for this. Petrie called him the Great Usurper. He would literally erase people's names and dig his own name in really deeply. And you can think about it with these artifacts. I like the idea that these vases, these precision vases that come from pre-dynastic times. Like a lot of them are in private collection. Imagine there's some rich private collector that builds himself a mausoleum and he wants to be buried with his vases in today's time.
Yeah.
But then we dig him up in the future, 1,000, 4,000 years later, 5,000 years later, and he's found with these artifacts. So like, well, he had these made. That's right. What we do. That's how we look at that. We have no idea whether he had them made or not. And in this case, no, those things are probably 10 or 15,000 or 5,000 years old already when they were buried with them. I think that's entirely the case. We should be considering that possibility when we look at the bones of some of these ancient civilizations like Egypt that have all these contradictions in them.
And you were saying something about knowledge that they like the Incas and the Maya and the Egyptians, they were gifted with some knowledge and then kind of try to build upon that. But just in our short, let's just say 2,000 years, okay? Let's say in the last 2,000 years or so, how much knowledge has been lost along the way? I mean, the farther back you go, it gets thinner and thinner, but like, look how much information we have right now. I mean, we have a lot of knowledge and information about the way the world works, our understanding to this point at least, the way the world works. But things like the Vedic text, things like, the Alexandria, and then let's not even go into what we lost with the Mayans when the Spanish came over and burned everything. I mean,
terrible.
Yeah, exactly. So there's so much knowledge that has been, but if everything goes away, all this knowledge goes away, and if a new human is born without another human to teach them, imagine it was you and I, we're the last two dudes, and there's like a new group of people who've never heard, we're the only ones that know anything about anything.
Right.
And people are like, and we're trying to explain to them the internet. We're trying to explain to them basic knowledge through story.
Yes.
We would be gods, essentially.
You would be, and you would probably, and that's exactly kind of, I mean, this is a good description of how knowledge is actually passed down before we had like writing and ways of storing it through oral tales and legends. And it's, that's what ends up as the origin stories. It ends up being put in books. It's these stories that are, and it's an interesting analysis, like when you look at von Deschen, like books like Hamlet's Mill that show you that there's this astronomical data encoded in these legends, myths, from Norse to like, Inuit traditions, South American traditions, like the even our stuff, the Middle Eastern religions. There's all this data that is similar across them, but they're tied up in these stories and these myths and legends. The same thing, I think, with recollections of events. It's not, you don't just tell people, here's the data, like, oh, in this year this happened, like the sky fell, or like, the planets move like this. That data gets wrapped up in these interesting stories, and there's figures are created and stories, and it's deified, and there's all this information to make it entertaining and make it memorable, and then that's passed down generation to generation through time. That's how that knowledge is kind of preserved. So when we look at origin stories and some of the myths and legends from the past, you have to understand, okay, you've got to sift through the embellishment of this and try to get to the core of it. What is the seed or the truth or the part of this that is probably true at its core? And there's a lot of that going on. Like science, more than we'd like to think, I think. In science had a bit of an overcorrection with the Age of Reason, right? Because if you go back before the Age of Reason and the rise of science, literally the explanation for our past and our history and our place on the planet was biblical. Like it was the religions. Like it's this 6,000 year story. It's the giant floods. It's this cataclysmic story, and that's let's just take Christianity for the purpose of this. And then science comes in and says, okay, no, we actually want to get away from the cataclysm, like the catastrophism and the cataclysmic nature of religious stories and things like that. And they kind of overcorrected and shifted, and they just wrote off everything that's included in those origins and religions. And the truth's somewhere in the middle now. I think we're starting to swing back the other way, where it's like, okay, there might, does erosion and gradualism, and can we explain stuff through, and the world as it is through these, through these gentle sort of processes we see acting on the ground today in terms of geology? Yeah, a lot of it we can, but there's also other features that are showing us the truth of some of the cataclysm that was maybe contained in these origin stories and religions, and we're coming back a little bit. But there was a huge overcorrection for a long period of time where we just dismissed this history that was contained in these origin stories, when I think in reality there's some grains of truth that are there that if we pay attention to it, we can find them. But yeah, I mean, no doubt endless amounts of knowledge has been lost. I mean, that's, people know about the fire of the Library of Alexandria, but there was literally dozens and dozens of events like that where we had other repositories of knowledge that went up in flames. That was just one. I mean, and of course the archives of the Vatican right now, who had a couple things. Hidden knowledge is another thing. Yes, 100%. What I wouldn't give to be able to go in there and read everything. Well, you mean it's probably all in Latin, but a lot of it's probably in other languages and Aramaic and things. But it'd be interesting to know what's in there for sure. Well, I mean, look, when I went into the Vatican Museum and you're just walking around, like, how much did they steal? Come on. I mean, they stole so much. Like, seriously? It's obscene how much stuff is in the Vatican Museum. It's one of the greatest museums I've ever walked into. I can't believe you didn't react to that second shot. I hit him right in the gun. But as I'm walking through it, how did he not react? 2,000 years of raping and pillaging of all of these artifacts and knowledge and books and stories that they're like, no, this can't get out. Let's just put that in. It's very Indiana Jones-esque. Oh, for sure. No, I think there's a lot of truth to that. It's funny, there is, if you get approved, that's a weird thing about the Vatican archives that I've heard, like assuming you even get approved to be on the list to even request access to it, you kind of have to be specific about what you want. So you almost need to kind of have an idea about what's in there before you can even get
right.
approved.
Like,
there's no
what
one.
do you
There's no
want
one
to read?
gets.
I don't know.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, you've got to have an understanding of a historical document that might be in there, and then get approved to say, "Oh, I'm interested in this." If you've got it, kind of thing. But no one ever gets approved to just, I just want to see what's in there. No. That's not happening. Yeah, I don't know, man. There's definitely, I think, a case to be made for a lot of like hidden knowledge and
we're getting
stuff
consistent runs though, like.
Yeah, it's in very select hands, and that comes to
what does that mean?
The dim, dark, distant past. I mean,
I don't
a few bits and
know.
pieces get out here and there that are
I
really
think it
interesting
means
to me. I'm
PB
really
face.
fascinated
I
by
think it's
ancient
all I
maps.
know.
I mean, I think there's a lot of data encoded in ancient maps that are typically the ancient maps that we have were drawn from even more ancient source maps that are all lost, but they show massive sophistication in the fact that we knew where Antarctica was and Australia was well before these were supposedly discovered in our time. They were able to do things like map longitude very accurately, which is not something we were able to do until like the turn of the 19th century, James Cook's second voyage of discovery. Yet we've got longitude. I mean, it requires sophisticated timepieces to measure longitude and navigate with longitude, which we weren't able to do until around 1800. But you go back thousands of years before that, and there's evidence that they were very capable of doing longitude accurately.
Oh my God!
You know, you've got the coastline of Antarctica. What's beneath the ice today is very accurately represented on some of these maps. Stuff like this. There's these crazy, very, very interesting data sets that can be found with analysis of ancient maps.
When do you think Antarctica was not under ice?
It depends on what part of it you're talking about. This is not an area that I'm particularly knowledgeable on. For sure, I mean, we do have glacial records of ice where we can drill down to bedrock to go back like 300,000-400,000 years. I think the ice core records, off the top of my head, I might be wrong, but I think some of the ice core samples do go back around 400,000 years. So we know there's been ice being laid down for at least that long.
In some areas, but not in all.
But in some areas, right? But not in all. I mean, that's the thing. You see on some of these maps that John was it Hapgood was the guy who exposed the fact that the Piri Reis map accurately depicts the coastline of Queen Maud's Land on Antarctica. But not only that, it shows rivers and mountains and territory like this. And then that was actually confirmed by, an Air Force reconnaissance squadron, and these literally guys that spend their lifetime looking at maps and analyzing maps, and they did the comparison. They're like, our only conclusion is that yes, this is the coast of Antarctica, but it shows what's beneath the ice. And this was confirmed by like sonar readings, because today there's ice on top of it, and they use these sonar and radar techniques or whatever to actually look at the land, and they go, yep, this actually matches what's on this map. And the Piri Reis maps made by Admiral Piri Reis, I think in the 1500s, that he actually says and writes on there that no, he most of it he built from more ancient source maps that are all gone now. We don't know how old they are.
Please,
where they came from. They're probably copies
the double duck?
of older stuff too. But yeah, I mean,
we'll take it.
So I don't know. I mean, I that 400,000 years is actually not out of the realm of possibility to me, because one of the other things that's happened in the last 20 years is that we know that the human race has gotten older and older. I mean, you go back, obviously the biblical version is 6,000 years old. Then
obviously,
and then it was for a long time it was suspected to be around 50,000 years, and then we found some after the advent of like C14 radiocarbon dating. I think there were some remains found in Ethiopia that put us at around 190,000 years. That was the oldest thing in the fossil record. Then, not that long ago, they found some remains in Morocco that put us back to around 300,000 years. That was the oldest, a jawbone that was the oldest thing in the fossil record. That still is, I think, the oldest thing in the fossil record. But now we've got DNA evidence and statistical studies into things like teeth morphology. And we can look at like when we split from a common ancestor, like Neanderthals and us being cousins, we split from a common ancestor, and we can look at kind of our genetic past and DNA. And both the teeth morphology studies and the DNA studies put us in the 800,000 to 900,000 year range. So I think let's set it a round number, an upper limit of around 1 million years old as a species. So all of a sudden, Antarctica being free of ice 400,000 years ago isn't out of the realm of possibility for humans. And not only humans, but we're the last humans left. Like there's other Neanderthals, Denisovans, all these other versions of essentially Homo sapiens that we don't know much about. And Neanderthals, bigger brains than we had. Who knows how civilized they might have gotten given time and place and energy and enough food to eat in nice weather. We used to think they couldn't speak, and of course speech is vital for civilization and for developing abstract concepts and communication. Now, I think the nomenclature on that's changed. Now we do think that they could speak, so maybe they had language, maybe they had communication. We just don't know, and I think these are all possibilities, and some of those species go back millions of years.
Do you think that our civilizations have been built and wiped out, built and wiped out, built and wiped out, and started from scratch? This kind of cycling system has been around for much longer than we even can conceive, maybe even 100 or 200 or possibly even longer. I'm not saying that 500,000 years ago that we were advanced civilizations.
Right.
Hey, as we've been discussing, maybe we were, and all the information was lost because there's no way that any of that stuff would have made it this long. So it's a fascinating intellectual exercise in your head. But it seems to me that there's definitely a lot that we still don't know, for sure.
100%. That's I think the.
Oh, what? Like why?
I try to say that. I mean, I don't speculate a lot, and I'd like to say I don't know when I don't know, and I think that's what's missing a lot from.
Let's go.
Let's just say that the mainstream version of history, and I think to some extent that's a product of the rise of the alternative authors and theories that are coming from guys like Graham Hancock, Boval, and John Anthony West. These guys, I think that the response and the popularity of that and has led to a much more authoritarian response from the academics who see themselves as owning the field. Like they think, well, I'm the gatekeeper of history. I tell you what the history is and what history of civilization is. Because back in the day, in the Victorian times, when this discussion was contained to these academic halls of residence, I mean, they were, and you can read it when you read the works of those people, and I have, and it's, they knew when there was something they didn't know. They were open about, like, well, we don't know. I think, like, Flinders Petrie was like, he couldn't explain some of the things he was finding from an engineering perspective. He's like, I don't know. But today, I think because there's a popularity of these, and the rise of this, I guess, the alternate history field, you have
really
a much more authoritarian response from the academics, and they're much more
I
likely
think
to
I
say,
need to look up a tad bit earlier for that glass to break.
When I think the reality is that they don't.
Oh, it was slow
and I think
though.
that would
That
be
was so
better
slow.
if we all
That
came
was
to
so
a middle
bad.
ground of we don't know. Let's investigate it with an open mind. In terms of the cycles of civilization,
We're
and this
really
is an interesting
getting,
point
we're
because I think this is
increasing our
one of
consistency.
the reasons why this is a very important
That's
field
huge.
and a very important
That's
discussion
very huge.
and investigation. I would say I think we've been through at least one cycle. I think at least there's evidence for at least one, and there may be more. Like we could have been through a cycle of civilization to cataclysm and then back again more than once, but for sure I think there's evidence for at least once, one decent one where it's we were pretty advanced. We got knocked back down to Stone Age, essentially hunter-gatherer lifestyles, and now what we term modern history, our own history, the last 6,000-7,000 years, that's our rise from that event. Now, they might have been precipitated by 10 or 15 or 20 or however many tens of thousands of years of just survival mode for humanity where it's very primitive. I don't know when that fall took place. It could have been the Younger Dryas, but it could have also been events that preceded it. And we know there were events preceding that, the Bowling Alarod. There's all sorts of climate upheavals if you go back further in time. But it's an important discussion because I think if more people understood that this was the cycle, that where our civilization, as advanced as we are, isn't the only way of doing it. I think a lot of people, at some level, you get taught in school, this is civilization. Like, this is what it means to be a modern human. Like, we went from the Stone Age to the space shuttle in this 6,000 year period. This almost linear, straight path. I mean, it's not obviously not linear, but we've gone from Stone Age to the space shuttle in 6,000 years. This is what it means to be an advanced civilization. It's the only way that civilization is done, is the way that we've done it. And you can just put out of your mind that there are other alternatives or other possibilities. And so we just go on with our daily lives, and that's just a fundamental tenet of what it means to be a modern human. Now, I think if you taught a different message in schools, if we understood that no, in fact, rather than this linear path, we're on this cycle between civilization and cataclysm. And there are other ways of doing civilization. There are other technologies. There's other ways of living. There's other possibilities. And on a long enough timescale, we're coming back around to this cataclysm part, and that it will end. Like, there is a definite risk of it ending. I think it could help to change our priorities as a species. Like, because people don't think about that sort of long-term future. It's just like, what's the next quarterly right. Results in the next political or election cycle or whatever.
So
we're not thinking long term. I'd like to think if you could have this change in the zeitgeist about what it means to be a modern human and this our place on this cycle, it might help us in the long term to change our priorities and spend a little less money on tanks and a little bit more money on space exploration and solving some of the longer term problems that face us as a species. And I actually think there's precedent for this too, for this type of ground shift in awareness and a new topic and a new awareness changing our behavior. And the example I'd like to use is climate change. Whether you agree with it or not. I mean,
I love this game. I love this game.
It's a controversial topic for a lot of people, but my point is that in the last 20 or 30 years, like that word, what the word climate change means, has shifted and changed, and it's undeniable that it's changing our behavior. It changes our investment decision, it changes our interactions with each other, it changes how we interact with the planet, it changes our behavior. And that's all because it's been this shift in awareness that's happened in the zeitgeist of humanity. It's a new idea that's come in and it's altered our behavior in fundamental ways, similar to the internet and things like that. And I just, as altruistic as it is, I do think that if we understood our past and we taught this at a fundamental level, that we're on this cycle, that it could actually have a similar effect. It could alter our behavior. And I think that's why I think this whole discussion is an important one. And finding out the truth about our history is not just an academic exercise, it's actually important for our future.
What is your opinion of the impact of these kind of conversations to our understanding of our spiritual side? Our spiritual understanding of the grand scheme of why we're even here, where we have been, where we're going, what is the purpose of this giant video game that we're all playing? You and I are both Mario and Luigi, just trying to save a princess from Donkey Kong,
So
essentially.
close.
You know what I mean?
think it's going to be another night.
All these conversations are
We're so
fascinating and
close.
intriguing
I gotta close the
intellectually,
window, but
on a spiritual
that's why my
standpoint,
stream
what
is
can
shutting
this
off
do,
in
and
because
what
my
is this
computer's
doing?
too
These
hot.
conversations doing for our spirituality.
But I'm too cold.
I
gotta
think
close the window.
it's helping to connect us to it. I would suspect. I think that this is a huge part in that. I mean, there's no doubt been a disconnection from spirit and from spirituality in our modern civilization. Like we've gotten further and further from that type of thing. Although does seem to be a renaissance in those concepts, modern shamanism, if you will. And I think this exposure to this discussion, and certainly the deeper you get into it, I think the more those elements of it come out. Like there's a
Probably
huge
play
spiritual
until my
connection you find in these
PC
ancient
overheats
cultures and
again and
civilizations, the way
OBS
they
shuts
operated.
off.
Like we're a little different in our civilization in that we seem to be deliberately shifting away from that and only valuing this kind of alert problem-solving states of consciousness.
11, come on, let's do it. Let's get this time. Let's do it.
States of consciousness that almost every other culture and civilization seems to have recognized and spent some effort developing and looking into. We're a bit different from that. I also think that, just personally speaking, that I think these types of investigations and this path to trying to find the answer, I think that is part of a spiritual journey as well, like being on the path kind of thing, like finding meaning. in your life and finding meaning in your pursuits and in your interests. I think that for a lot of people, this type of a discussion and these topics help to fill that role, because I believe we're spiritual beings as well. We're not just meat and bone and flesh. And we need to find purpose. Human beings need something to do. They need to find purpose. If you are purposeless, you're not generally very happy. It's not a great place to be, and it's hard to find purpose in some of the modern in the modern world. It can be a real challenge for a lot of people, and I think a lot of the distractions, and this is me personally speaking with this. I think the distractions and the entertainment,
Moonraker's comment,
things that are thrown
blowjob,
at you
oh my
as
God.
Just to fill that void in the modern world, celebrity culture and consumerism and things like this, they don't really give you purpose. And I think a lot of the purpose that we're fed
comment of
when we go through the
2024
education system that sets us up to be this cog in a machine and teaches us consumerism and to get the next thing and to make more money and to just climb the corporate ladder and be a good worker, all these sort of things, ultimately don't really tick that box when it comes to purpose, and in fact can be a little
when
destructive.
you meme
lots of destructive elements
a
about
meme
our
comes
society.
out
As
of
nice
it,
as it is in the West, at least, and in the first world countries, to have, I do believe that it is the best time to be alive
right
still.
there.
I hold that opinion. Like, I'm not naive enough to think that hot water and plumbing and the internet's not a good thing. It makes life convenient, but it's in a lot of ways antithetical to finding purpose and achieving something. I think that's part of that spiritual journey, and for me at least, and I think for a lot of people, these conversations and this topic help to fill that, because I really do think there's something to being on the path and trying to get to these answers. Whether we ever get to them or not, that's not the important part. It's about being on that path and trying to seek that knowledge and to understand it.
Now I'm going to ask you a few questions to ask all my guests, because I can't talk to you for another 4 or 5 hours. And you will definitely come back on the show, because we haven't even touched ancient India or Japan or China or all these other sites that I would love to talk to you about.
Kalasasai Caves, check them out.
They're insane. It's just so much stuff.
Barabar as well.
So there's tons and tons. So we'll have you back without question.
Yeah.
But these are questions I ask all my guests. How do you define, what is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
Definition of living a fulfilled life. Well, we just kind of touched on. I think it's finding purpose. I think finding purpose is about the most you can hope for. And this is beyond. We all know that. Look, you have to tick the basic boxes of like food, shelter, the physiological needs of what it means to be human.
Not bad.
Beyond that,
we're doing all right. We're doing all right.
As complex sort of thinking animals, what we are, finding purpose, I think, is about all you can ask in terms of fulfillment and finding life, and at least for me, that's how I see it.
If you could go back in time and speak to little Ben, what advice would you give him?
You're like, cheer up, it'll be okay. Depends how little we're talking, but then
5-year-old Ben,
5-year-old Ben. Oh man, I barely remember that guy. Yeah. Don't take things too seriously. Would probably be a good one. That would probably be about it.
How do you define God or source?
The universe, nature, I think. That would be about it. I do. Yeah, it's hard to think that everything is a giant cosmic accident. I'd say that.
Right. Yeah.
But
regardless if you believe or you don't believe.
Source is a thing. Yeah.
Sorry if there's been any channel point redemptions. I don't think I get the notifications on my tablet phone here.
You asked the easy
so
questions.
if anyone redeems anything, I'm sorry if I don't respond to it.
To be lived is what I'd say. That's what it's for. To be appreciated and to be lived. It's a gift. I genuinely believe that. Like, to be born into a human body and to have the privilege and experience of life, and and for it, it can be miserable for a lot of people and short and nasty. But if that's not your experience, it's a real privilege, and it should be lived and not wasted.
And where can people find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing?
Thank you. UnchartedX.com is the main place I publish all my videos. Are there obviously on YouTube? It's youtube.com/c/UnchartedX. I also stream live on Twitch a couple times a week. And you can find all those details generally below my videos, as well as my social medias, Twitters and Instagrams and things like that.
And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
You keep an open mind. Dig into this stuff. Keep an open mind, and yeah, that would be the main thing. Is just like just keep an open mind about this stuff, as I try to, and not be fixed in your ideas. Like I've opinions change. New data can always change. Can change what we know. The next spade full of dirt from the archaeologists might completely change our perspective on history. We don't know. So try to keep an open mind.
Stay curious, as they say. Stay curious.
Stay curious.
It has been a pleasure talking to you, man. I look forward to our next conversation.
Stay
Thank
humble
you for fighting the good
and
fight.
curious.
Thanks, Alex. Good to talk to you, man.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.
Please, like this run. This run, Rose. Please. Like, please. Aw, come on, man. Come on, man. Dudes, what's the time on that? Fucking 1:16 again. Oh, come on, man. We're so close, guys. We're so fucking close. Come on, man.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Richard.
Ancestors may have colonized South America. It challenges theories of how Native Americans first arrived in the Americas. Well, of course, this is the Daily Mail, so, you know, we can expect sensational headlines. However, in this case, they're spot on, and the sensational headlines reveal even more sensational scientific research behind it. And this is this is a little extract from the scientific research. There's been this long-held view that there was a single origin for all Native American peoples, and that nevertheless that view has been challenged by some. But advances in DNA technology are making these kind of explorations much more possible. And what's been discovered is this very puzzling connection between peoples of Australasia, particularly Papua New Guinea, and certain tribes deep in the Amazon rainforest. Now, this is a real mystery, because the view, I'll come to that, what makes it even more of a mystery is further research in 2018 on members of these tribes and looking for ancient skeletal remains. They found ancient skeletal remains 10,400 years old in the Amazon, which bear that same signal. And this tells us that this Aboriginal connection reached South America very, very long ago, and researchers are agreed that it must have reached South America in the late Pleistocene, which is near the end of the last ice age. It's a very important study because it establishes that there's no recent connection here. This is a very ancient connection in South America, and it really creates a problem because the view of archaeology for decades, really a century, has been that all the peopling of the Americas happened this way. That they crossed the Bering Straits, which were a land bridge during the Ice Age. Sea level was lower then, and that they traveled through
Yo, Totem, bro, what up, man?
And eventually down into South America. The problem is that this genetic
I'm really proud of this. I'm not gonna lie. No, you gotta spam it. Try spamming
South America,
please.
And in Papua New Guinea and neighboring areas.
Please try spamming it.
And I talked to Eski Willislev, who's
That's
one
not
of the
a
world's
command.
leading geneticists.
Yes. Okay, no, chill, chill. There we go.
Email exchange. Willislev told me that currently no
You got one.
has
You got
a good
one.
explanation of the Austro-Melanesian
So
signal.
what it does, yo, check it out.
Explanations are purely
What it does
what we do know
is
that
it
it's present in
creates an
some
odd
Native
job
American groups,
for you to
particularly from
do
Brazil. We also know it
in
has to be
order to show.
Plutonium.
I'm gonna do this run, but in order to
Amongst
show
the
that you're
possible
not
explanations
cheating.
for the presence of this
So
Australo-Melanesian DNA
if I
in the
pass away
Amazon,
here, I'm gonna
Professor
do in the
Willislev
level stat
offered
from
in his email
Goldeneye
exchange with
statue.
me the following.
Retrieve the
Someone
key
holding
card
the
from the
signal
scientist.
comes into the
Use it
Americas,
to gain
not
access
through
to the
Bering
control
but
room.
crossing
The
into
key
South
card.
America
What's that?
across the ocean.
That's probably
Based purely on
the
genetic
flight
data,
recorder.
This is the
No?
most parsimonious
Key card.
explanation. But it
I
does
guess
not
it's
make
kind of the
practical
key card to
sense.
open the gates
So I asked
and
I
exit
asked
in
Eske
Natalia.
why
Anyways,
it doesn't make practical sense. Is he basing that on
so
the
you
archaeological
do that
consensus that
to
our
show
upper
that you're
Paleolithic
not
and
playing a
early Holocene ancestors were
pre-recorded
incapable of
video
undertaking long
to
transoceanic
prove that you
voyages? And
aren't
his reply,
cheating. Isn't
in
it
regard
genius?
to crossing the Pacific,
I
I'm
did
not
drop
saying
the
it did
volume.
not happen, but there is no evidence suggesting that humans were capable of such a journey until quite late in history, the Polynesian expansion. It's a possibility, and I'm open to the idea, but there's not much evidence supporting it except going for
Why
the
was
most
someone doing that recently?
parsimonious solution of the genetic
Yeah,
data.
man, there
Well, let me
was a
say
lot
right at the outset
of
that in
controversy
science, parsimony is looked for. It's best to
on
look for the easiest and most direct and most simple explanation of something rather than elaborate.
the elite. Did
huge
you
other
not hear about
explanations. And
Frigate
this
21?
mysterious genetic signal in South America
That
is
someone
best
claims
best explained because none
and
of it's in North
still
America
currently
by, a crossing of the
claims
Pacific
to
during
have
the Ice Age,
achieved
which supposedly
Frigate
our
21.
ancestors were incapable of doing. So we're in
Yeah,
the habit
dude,
of
on the
dividing
elite,
world into
I don't
the
want to
new
be like
world
spreading
and
drama,
the old world.
but I
And
question,
it's
like I just,
generally held, it's generally
I'm
been
just, I
viewed
think it's kind of
that all
questionable. I mean,
civilization
it's a big
began
thing,
in
man.
the old world. And this book
It's been going on the last like few weeks, so I made
by Professor Samuel Noah
these
Kramer,
commands,
is a hugely influential
dude.
text.
Like,
And basically,
this uses
basically what he's saying is
ChatGPT
that Sumer, ancient Sumer in
to
Mesopotamia, was the first
prove
human
that
civilization.
you're not cheating.
First organization of
Like,
human
I'm
beings
not
that
even
deserved
memeing. I did it for the
called,
meme, but like, that's random,
a
right? So let's go to a random
And
level.
it's still influential, even though it was
28
first
shots,
published
67
in
degrees,
1956. And
Shiva,
indeed, this
no
part
way.
of
Is
the
he
old
alright?
world
What's he up to,
is
man?
a center of civilization. There's no
28
no
shots,
doubt about
67
it. I mean,
degrees.
there's the Sumerian Empire.
What's that? That's 67
And
degrees.
up there we have the incredible site of Göbekli
That's
Tepe
4
between the
clips.
headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They call this
Right,
area
like,
Mesopotamia
this is super
because it means
valid.
between
That's
the rivers.
super valid. That totally
I'm not feeling
validates
that there's some
everything.
connection between what happened in
It's
Sumer and what
genius. You
happened
gotta do it twice,
much
though,
earlier
right? Like,
in Göbekli Tepe.
pretty much right back to
But
back.
the new evidence from the Americas
To make sure you didn't
threatens to
change the
overturn
code,
this
you know what I mean?
paradigm that places the origins of civilization in the Middle East.
Slur? No way. Are you serious?
The world was so different during the last ice age. There were ice caps.
He's
3
old school
kilometers
though,
deep.
man. Like, not that like
Sea
old
level was
school
400
words were
feet below
appropriate. at the
than it is
time.
today.
You know what I mean?
And there were freezing temperatures.
Like,
but then, really rather abruptly, around 11,600 years ago,
like that's
the
super
Ice Age
valid.
came to an end.
That 100% validates the run.
And the whole face of the world
and
changed.
even
Everything
made an
became different
image
when we start to look at the
so
world
that
as we-
people
as
can
we see it
do that
today.
themselves in stream
So
elements.
there is
So there's no
the conventional
excuse.
notion.
Like,
There's
there's
the
no
Bering
excuse.
Strait now, and there's how they were during the Ice Age. And it did seem obvious to archaeologists that this must have been the main route for getting into the Americas, and indeed for a long
Or they
time.
get
they thought it
offended
was the
by
only
any community.
route for
Dude,
getting
there's a
into the
lot of
Americas.
groupthink.
And there was a
I'm not
theory
saying
that
whether
there had
someone's
been a
right
nice
or
free
wrong.
corridor between
There's a
the
lot of
Colbert and the
groupthink going
Laurentide
on
ice sheets.
in the
And that
elite,
theory, by the
man.
way, has been
In anywhere, in any
recently
community.
completely
Nothing wrong with
blown
it.
out of the water.
What's
Nobody can
crazy
use
is
that nice
that
free corridor.
there has to
because
be
it
a
didn't
devil's
exist.
advocate
And,
in any situation in order to avoid groupthink, right?
here's the general
So
picture,
even the devil's
of
advocate
these migrations
is
and
being
through that
slandered.
supposed ice-free corridor
It's crazy, it's
down into
wild,
North
it's
America
insane.
about 12,000 years ago, and then eventually onwards into South America.
Aren't friends with the right people, yeah.
And it's these genetic discoveries.
So I
of
made
this
this.
close
I made this as a
relationship between
meme.
Australasians
Like
and certain
oddjob
peoples
is
in
like
the
a
Amazon
meme.
rainforest that are challenging
It's just funny, right?
long-held view
It opens the
of people of the
possibility to what you
Americas.
could possibly do with
The long-held
ChatGPT.
view became a dogma.
Control. To play
That
Control.
dogma was called
Run around
Clovis
looking for.
first.
Let's do that.
These
You
were
know.
supposed to be
Let's
the
do it.
Clovis culture.
Let's look
They're
for some
supposed to be the
cameras
first
and Control.
inhabitants
Let's do it.
of North America. And they're not supposed to have come into North America until around 13,400 years ago.
You know what I mean?
Mysteriously, 12,800 years ago, they vanish entirely from the stage. They're recognized by these fantastic fluted points that they made. So they were held to be the first culture of the Americas, and for decades, archaeologists
seen
were
the cameras.
adamant that no human beings had entered the Americas before 13,400
If
years ago.
both people use this slur in the game
but
context, they'll pick on the
Things are
person
beginning
who
to
isn't
change. This is a
friends with
report
the
from
right ones.
2013.
That's why
Not so long
decentralized
ago,
policies
there
are
was a
not
seemingly controversial
policing
answer
anyone's
to the question of
opinion.
how and when the first settlers made it to the
Yeah.
Americas. Some 13,000 years ago, a group of people from Asia walked
Well,
across a land bridge that connected Siberia to Alaska and headed
I
south.
don't think
And
there's
these people
enough
were known
evidence
as the
provided
Clovis.
to
By
prove
the way,
that the frigate
why do
21s
we call them the Clovis culture?
were real.
Edinburgh
And I say
itself, we
ones
have no
because
idea
apparently
what
the
they
person that
call them.
claimed it said they duped it
Because there's a
within
site
the
called
last
Blackwater
week.
Draw
They uploaded, okay,
down in,
they
New Mexico.
uploaded
And
a.
in that site were found many of those
Are they still up? No,
Clovis
they took it
points
down and he's banned.
by archaeologists, but the problem was there was no
Because
beer
we
available
can't
right there
trust
at the
him.
site. But where there was
Doesn't
beer
mean we don't
available
like
was in the
him.
town of Clovis,
Doesn't mean
New
we don't
Mexico,
want him here. We
about
want him
10 miles
here.
away.
Yeah, he's
So they
banned.
called it the Clovis
But like,
culture.
dude, there's been a vote. There's a public vote.
Yeah.
Dude, it's crazy. Like, okay, I'm
For
gonna tell you,
decades,
I'm
this
just
was
for the beans,
received
bro. Dude,
wisdom.
I'm the.
So compelling was the
There's only
Clovis
like I
first
think
model that
the
few
elite
archaeologists
council
even
also
contemplated
thinks.
an alternative. Some with
I
the
think they banned
temerity
because
to
of
do
his
so,
lie. There's been a few
proclaimed a
lies. They
Clovis
lied directly to
police
the council.
intent on suppressing
He lied
dissent.
to the
Believe me,
council.
the Clovis police was a real thing. It wrecked the lives
All of them.
of quite a number of archaeologists who took a dissenting view and held that it was absurd to suggest that the Americas had
But I
been
mean, that's not
depopulated
like that's
13,000
not
years ago. Of course they
my
didn't.
opinion. I just don't think the
Jacques
run is
Saint
real
Mars,
because he
who
uploaded a
conducted,
run.
excavations at
The first one he
huge
uploaded
caves
was
in the
interlaced.
Yukon,
It has
found
interlacing.
evidence of
You
the
know what I
presence of
mean?
humans in the Americas
Where
more
there,
than 20,000
it's you
years
see the
ago.
hash lines like my
That was
first streams
heresy to the
three
Clovis
years ago.
police. They
And this is a
descended
top
upon
player,
him.
man.
They
Not a top player, but
recruited their friends in the media to attack him, to present him
got
as a
some world
pseudoscientist,
records
to say
supposedly,
that
but
he
I
was
don't know
telling
if they're.
lies, to say that he was fraudulently presenting evidence. They did
It's just
everything
crazy,
possible,
man. So
to
most
ruin
the
his career.
people
And as the
don't
Smithsonian later admitted,
agree
rather
with
than
me.
launching a
They think it's
major new
real.
search
How
for
can
more
they think
early
it's real?
evidence,
There's
the
like you
finds stirred
can't.
fierce opposition.
Nothing. It's
And
like it's
the
not
bitter
even a
debate, one of the
personal
most
thing. It's
acrimonious and
you
unfruitful
can't.
in all of
There's
science,
no way.
as nature
And he
later
claims he has no
Poor Jacques Saint Mars.
sessions,
He was
no
ruined
system
by the
reset,
Clovis police. His research funding was
no
he was passed by in corridors
session,
by colleagues who would no longer
and
speak
then,
to him. He was treated as a
like
pariah.
the thing. The issue is like
every way
the
was
person claims
insulted
that he doesn't
and
need
humiliated.
the session.
But he was right.
He says that
But he was right.
having the session wouldn't
Because
mean
Bluefish
anything, and he
caves
deleted
were
it for disk
re-excavated.
space.
And we now know that
I said that's exactly. I said that's exactly what a cheater would say.
24,000 years
Those are the words I wrote on the form.
Jacques-Cinq-Mars was totally
Like that
correct,
is like
and
you are making the most
research completely
difficult,
vindicates him. But too
probable,
late to save
likely
him
way
from
that you
destruction of
cheated.
his career.
Why?
Fellow archaeologists
Why would you do
inflicted
this?
upon him. As the Smithsonian admitted
Twice.
in 2017, the study does
A 1 in a
raise
billion
serious
session
questions about the
twice.
effect of the
Frigate
decades
21
long debate
twice.
over the peopling of the
Untying
New World.
Carl's 22
Did archaeologists in the mainstream marginalize
twice
dissenting
in a
voices
week,
on this key issue?
and the first time was
If so, what was the
interlaced.
impact on
There's
North
no
American
way. This guy has Depot 23 apparently. This guy's like one of the. I'm not gonna. One of the first guys to have Depot 23. Yeah. So there's no reason why what he would like. Just even if it even if he got the runs, I'm not calling him arrogant. Just the arrogance of what you're going to be recording Frigate 21 attempts interlaced. Are you serious right now? Like, unless you're recording both. But you can't, like, the arrogance of it. Not, like, if you got it, great. He's the best. He's the best ever. But, man, I don't think so. I don't believe it.
Here in 2007 that Clovis was debunked.
I don't believe it, man. And I
Clovis
think
people known for their
he did it as a
distinct behavior were not the
troll,
first humans to set
and
foot in the Americas after all. That's
people kind of
2007.
backed him. And I
2012,
think he's
once
like, oh
again,
shit,
Clovis is
I
debunked.
can't say
Clovis
like I was
theory
just
is put to
trolling.
rest at Paisley Caves.
Or maybe
And
like a
then
moderator
Wikipedia admitting
said
now recently, by the way, I regard
that
Wikipedia
the worst
as a
thing you can
source
do
of
is submit a fake run,
profound
which
source
I don't
of
think is true.
disinformation.
I think it's worse to
I know
lie
from looking at Wikipedia
about
entries from subject
a
that I know
submitted
about
run
that they're
that
not
is fake
credible.
instead of
They're
having
presenting an
submitted a
agenda.
fake run and said,
And I
oh
suggest
haha,
that's probably true for
I got you
everyone
guys.
that's on Wikipedia. It's the first stop that we all go to get information, but it's not a reliable
But it's,
source.
so it's the
a source of
apology. It's not the
It's
upload.
useful, but check
It's
everything they
it's
say
the
very,
lie.
very, very carefully.
Because he said he duped it
So
twice.
Clovis, the
with no
need to
session
debunk
and no
Clovis
reset.
keeps on happening again
Off
and again.
stream.
It comes back like a sort of zombie. And it has
After
to be killed
posting
again,
it
it just
under an
won't
alt.
go away. So here's a 2022 report.
He
in the
posted
big
it.
thing,
Okay,
Clovis
he posted it
debunked.
under a
Hey,
random alt called
archaeologists now
Rebecca
saying they debunked
Smith.
it in the 90s
I'm
and
not
in
even
the
joking,
2000s,
dude.
and now in
Dude, like
2022 they're still needing to say it's
Rebecca
been
Smith's.
debunked. This is an ongoing debate, and we have not
I'm not even
got rid
joking.
of that zombie yet. There
And
are
it was
still
like her
people
page was
clinging
Frigate
to Clovis'
21.
first idea. But here's Al Goodyear.
The
Al
interlaced-
Goodyear
no,
has
interlaced.
excavated a site called Topper, which puts man in North America 50,000
So,
years ago. He
like,
was
to
subjected
not have
the
the
same
session,
kind of attacks that Jacques-Cinq-Mars
it's a lie.
was subjected to. There I am talking with Al Goodyear, and he took
So
me
that's why I
to
made
the
this
site,
like
and he
fucking
explained that initially they went there
That's
to
why I'm just
investigate what they
memeing.
thought was entirely a Clovis site.
like
But
I'm
then they
memeing the
did
fuck out of
something
this.
that
'Cause that's
other
all I can
archaeologists
do.
had never done, because
That's all I
archaeologists
can
were
do.
told
I'm
there's no
just a
point in looking
fucking
deeper than Clovis. You know,
martyr.
with these layers in the soil,
You're just
the younger
just
material is
the
at top
martyr.
and the older material is at the bottom. They said there's no point in looking deeper because we know that Clovis
But I
was
think I'm
first.
on the same page as
But
the
Al
council.
Goodyear dissented,
Like it's
and he
just
dug
you have
deeper.
to.
And
Like it's
digging deeper
crazy.
below the
No one
Clovis
wants to
layer,
ban him,
he found
but it has to be
compelling
done.
evidence that
You don't
humans had
trust
been
him.
present more than 50,000
Unless
years
he
ago.
admits
It's
it, I
now
mean.
beginning to be
Or
reluctantly
starts streaming or
accepted by
whatever.
the archaeological
Like,
community, but Al went through decades of hate and unpleasantness because he
wow.
stood out from the crowd.
Was that? They said literally the exact same thing again. Come on.
The Cerruti Mastodon site is another.
It's time for me to shut up and
site.
play.
Oh my God, I mean, those Clovis police are
Yeah,
saying
dude.
humans were only in America for 13,000 years ago. Here's
It's
a site
all
that
there
says
on
humans
the
were in America
elite.net, man.
130,000
But I didn't.
years ago.
I just wanted
10 times as long.
to share. I made a.
And this is
I
the
shared
work
this
of
image on the elite.net
paleontologist Tom
of
Demeray
the
and a
command
number of his
and what it
colleagues
means.
at the San Diego Natural History
Because
Museum.
it's
And
got
they
you just
found
got to
a
meme it.
mastodon, the remains of a mastodon, which had
There's
clearly
no
been
like.
butchered and
There's
the
no
marrow extracted
excuse.
by human beings.
Like
Exactly
from
what kind of
today,
human beings
from
they were
today,
130,000 years ago,
from
we
today.
can't
Let
say
this
for sure.
be
Because
the
130,000
day.
years ago, there were Neanderthals.
No excuse moving
There
forward.
were Denisovans. There were also anatomically modern humans. But the handiwork of humans is clearly evident in this site.
Oh, so many
And
grenades.
Tom Demeray took me backstage in the San Diego Natural
Cameras.
History Museum.
Looking
He
for
showed me that
cameras.
evidence, and it's utterly compelling. But of course, he was immediately
Right,
attacked.
anyways, you get the idea.
They don't call them the Clovis police anymore, but there was just a general attack on what was regarded as the fantastical notion that human beings could have been in the Americas 130,000.
And you can add it
years
to your
ago.
stream
And
too.
Tom
It's
Demeray and his
ChatGPT,
team
man.
have replied to that attack very thoroughly, refuting it. But the friends of the dead hand of archaeology in the media keep on reporting
Your
that
stream,
it's been debunked.
if you want.
It has not been
Oh,
debunked.
I get it.
Any attempt to debunk it has in fact been debunked by Tom Desmarais and his colleagues. Here's Paulette Steeves. She's a Native American archaeologist, and she is very unhappy with the way that American archaeology is evolving. And she talks about how ignorance is produced through neglect, secrecy, suppression, destruction of documents, unquestioned tradition, and socio-political selectivity.
That's a quote.
Educational materials were framed in such a way to support colonization of the mind, teaching people to think in ways acceptable to the nation state and not to question so-called scientific authorities.
Yeah, dude.
So look,
dude.
My kids made for me
I'm trying to be quiet, like, but like, I called it out. I called him out in front of the whole community. I called him some names that I regret doing, like a fool, like a juvenile fool. He didn't call me any names.
Becomes much more complex and
but
much
then
more
it
difficult.
just,
But if you have a very long
like, we don't. It's not that we don't like him.
There's much more
We
material
like the guy.
investigate.
I don't even know the guy.
And
I like him.
Americas have been inhabited by humans
But I don't trust him.
30,000 years, which is
Not
more
yet.
than twice as long as Europe.
Not now.
Then our understanding of prehistory must change.
But I could.
We have a vast resource-rich landmass here, and it may have been the location of hitherto unrecognized advances and developments in the story of civilization. But if this were so,
but like, why interlaced is just, and then to submit it, and then to not say that there's no session.
Well, here's a bit of the open letter that the Society for American Archaeology published and sent to Netflix, complaining about my Ancient Apocalypse series, saying really vile things about
my post, independent of my
demanding
bad
that Netflix
rude
reclassify
words,
it
hurtful
as science
words.
fiction. Because it
pretty
doesn't
much
represent the orthodox archaeological
because the council was going to have a vote in a couple days, and my post was pretty much, yeah, he's definitely, the council is definitely going to have to ban this individual, unfortunately, not because we don't like him, but because there's no way to trust this individual, and that's pretty much what it came down to, because the council brought up other lies that I didn't even know about. That, I mean,
rather than entertainment with
I'm focusing on the runs.
If there were any credible evidence for a global ice age civilization of the kind Hancock suggests, archaeologists would investigate.
I didn't need more evidence, more random lies, because people random like I lie about stuff in the past.
If the evidence
but I don't lie about gold lie. So it's not like one-to-one, you know what I mean?
And promote it in our own outreach materials. Contrary to Hancock's claims, archaeology does not willfully ignore credible evidence, nor does it seek to suppress it in
I really hate streaming.
fashion. I actually don't think that any conspiracy is going on here. I think people get locked into a particular mindset. Their careers depend on it. The approval of their colleagues depend on it. The funding for their research
Toad Christian said that he's back in Fort Lauderdale today.
And they find it very difficult.
He was in here, he said he
Part
returned.
of the problem is that very ancient structures, thousands of years older than archaeologists suppose, may be hiding in plain view.
God bless him.
Surrounded by other younger structures. And the best example of that really is the Great Sphinx of Giza. And these two temples.
Hey, it's consistent, man.
This temple is
it's consistent. Let me tell. I will put it on the board. That which has been said is consistent.
Erosion patterns in trench around the Sphinx, and which were originally on the body of the Sphinx before it was restored, speak eloquently of what is called precipitation-induced weathering. And this was first noticed by the late great John Anthony West, a dear friend of mine, who passed away.
Well, I was hoping he would be here still.
John West brought Professor Robert Schock, a geologist from Boston University, to the site, and Schock said, "It's obvious. This site has been subjected to at least 1,000 years of heavy rainfall."
But I get it, things change.
Well, it happened between roughly 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. That's the last time that there were rains capable of causing this level of erosion in the Egyptian desert. See those deep vertical fissures running down there. That's the rainwater pouring off the side of the escarpment and selectively hollowing out the weaker areas of rock.
I'm the only one.
For most of the 20th century, was the consensus
Maybe a
of
couple more
archaeologists
that think
that
the runs are
megalithic
fake.
architecture was beyond the capacities of hunter-gatherers and required the presence of long-term settled
I'm the only one.
agricultural communities to evolve. And it seemed to reinforce this view that no
This
megalithic
gentleman has
architecture had been
definitely
found
somehow
anywhere in the world
gained
that was more than
so
6,000
much
years
trust.
old. In fact, that was one of the main arguments.
I think
that
I have to be the devil advocate as the completely unbiased,
show us another culture that's 12,000 years
newbie,
old anywhere in the world,
loudmouth guy. I have to.
We know that there is
Because
no culture capable of
it doesn't make
creating
any
anything like the
sense.
Sphinx until 4,500 years ago. Therefore, of course, the Sphinx is 4,500 years ago. But of course, that changed completely with Göbekli Tepe, which is a deliberately buried site, deliberately buried 11,600 years ago. A very, very ancient site. Sorry, it began 11,600 years ago. It was deliberately buried about 1,000 years later, and thus sealed, and thus an intact archaeological scene. And the evidence from Göbekli Tepe is that this site is 11,600 years old. It dates to the end of a period called the Younger Dryas, which I'll talk a bit more about. And my goodness, if you're capable of creating these 20-ton megalithic pillars and this huge site, then you're certainly capable of creating the Great Sphinx. So the notion that the Sphinx is somehow out of context has to completely change now that we have Göbekli Tepe. I'm here with the late Professor Klaus Schmidt.
How did you
who,
know?
Unlike most archaeologists, did not sort of make the sign of the cross and run away as soon as I appeared on the site, but actually gave me 3 days of his time.
Following him, dude. You know how like it's been a struggle to get like people to follow me back again. I lost the trust of a lot of leaders. I've been following him for a long time, over a year. Because I didn't know about him before. You know, I'm a newbie, dumb guy.
Huge enclosures under the ground that they haven't excavated yet. The story of Göbekli Tepe is just
I don't know why he's wilding, bro. Like, he's wilding out. I think, because Irie also wrote this. And Irie, that's what I mean. Irie wrote
interesting looking bits of
what
stone
makes the most
sticking out
sense
of
is
the
if
ground.
he was just trolling
But
everyone.
now Karahan Tepe has been excavated. And this is how it looks today.
He felt like he couldn't
an
claim
extraordinary
that
megalithic
they were
site of the
fake
same
after all,
age as
because then
Göbekli
that
Tepe.
might actually get him
Around about
banned forever.
11,600
Which I
years
don't
ago.
think is a
And,
bannable
here
forever
we have
offense if someone
pillars
says
carved
it's a
directly
fake
out of the
run
bedrock,
once
and then one
or a
freestanding
million
pillar
times.
included there, and then this
I don't think it's a
curious
bannable
face
forever offense. I
sticking
don't.
out of the wall.
I think
which
what
I
it
must
is
say
lying about it,
gave me
is
the
submitting it
chills
and
the
then
first time
lying
I
about
saw
it and then
it. I
trying to
don't know
claim it's
what
real
it's about. It's got a sort of snake-like feeling and with a human head
without
on the edge of a
resolution,
snake's body. So
without a
there
session.
there is reason to conclude that the Sphinx does not stand alone. There are now
Yeah,
recognized
man.
archaeological sites which involve
I'm
huge
a
amounts of
martyr,
workmanship
dude.
that are as old as the Sphinx. And I wonder if
I
some
feel like
other
I'm taking
sites
crazy
have been
pills.
misinterpreted, if sites are multi-layered, that many different cultures have been involved in them.
I guess not.
And
The elite
archaeologists perhaps
council
making the
definitely
mistake of
believes
just
it.
dating
It also
them
has
to
a
the most
similar
recent
opinion.
culture
It's the
that
trust
was
issue.
present. This is Baalbek in the Lebanon.
And I'm glad the elite council
and,
shared
undoubtedly
their
a
opinion.
Roman temple here. Temple of Jupiter
Each
that I'm
individual
sitting in,
one
and behind
had
it
the
the
courage
Temple of
to
Bacchus,
share publicly.
dedicated to wine.
Obviously,
Those
much
Romans knew
more
how to have
politically
fun.
correctly said than the way I did it.
A Roman site for sure, but what about this
But I mean, man,
bizarre enclosure wall that surrounds it, which is totally separate
it's
from the Temple of
like,
Jupiter? What's this about? This is
honestly,
called the Trilithon.
honestly,
Each of these
if
three
he admits
blocks
that, like the
weighs
21, if
900 tons.
if he admits what
900
Irie said,
tons. And it's
that
extraordinary the way they're built into a
the
wall and raised
Trilithons were
30
fake
feet
and he was
above
just
the ground
trolling
like this. A
people,
wall, the
and
provenance
then
of which has
people
not
kind
been
of backed him,
established
and
by archaeology.
like he felt like he couldn't
Just another look, and
change
I'm in the
his
picture
mind
for
on that
scale
because he might get
at
banned
the-
forever
at the
because of it.
Trilithon. Nearby
I can forgive.
is the quarry.
But to lie about it, to claim
The
it,
quarry contains a number of very large blocks that
interlaced,
were never
like
transported
duped,
from the quarry site.
without a session,
Now, the one
claiming
I'm
we don't
standing
need a
on
session.
weighs 1,000 tons, 100 tons more than the ones in that wall.
How can you believe it?
And
How can you believe that?
That one over there on the other side of the road, unfortunately used now as a rubbish tip, weighs 1,200 tons.
It's like something.
And the one here that I'm standing on here, which is only recently excavated, turns out to weigh 1,400 tons. Why only recently excavated? Because the whole site was covered in sedimentation. What archaeologists say, and it still amuses me.
You're back.
Of course, the Romans did everything. They found they could move 900-ton blocks, but 1,000 tons was too much for them. So they couldn't move them. So they just left them in the quarry. In my view, that's a very un-Roman thing to do. The Romans were very practical people. Okay, let's say they couldn't move 1,000 tons, but having gone to all the work of creating huge megaliths like this, they wouldn't have wasted them. They'd have sliced them up like loaves of bread and used the already shaped blocks in other constructions. The fact that they didn't do that these are still there, suggests to me the whole site was covered during Roman times, and it's only in more recent times that it's been excavated and revealed. And then let's go to Sacsayhuaman in the Sacred Valley near the town of Cuzco in Peru, in the high Andes. Incredible megaliths there, which archaeology gives entirely to the Incas, even though the Incas themselves recognized and honored the work of predecessors. Archaeology gives this work entirely to the Incas. I mean, that's me, for scale, standing beside that block. And look at these weird sort of holes in the block, and the way the blocks are almost melted together in a very strange manner. It's very different from what is definitely Inca architecture. I'll just show a few more shots. These sort of scallops in the side of the block, these holes, it almost looks like the stone was soft and that people were pressing something into it. Maybe it raises the question, was there a way of manipulating and even melting stone, putting it in place? The work is very fine. I mean, you can't get a razor blade between the joints in the blocks. It's just incredibly fine megalithic work. And I was privileged to I've had several visits to the Andes with Jesus Gamarra, who himself is a descendant of the Incas, and who is a local researcher following in the footsteps of his father, who also was intensely interested in the megaliths. And he and his father are both confident, absolutely confident, that the Incas simply were latecomers, and that they rebuilt, they built on top of, they modified, they honored by overbuilding the much older structures that are the megalithic structures. And here we are at Pisac, and Jesus is showing me different aspects of the site, and at Sacsayhuaman, and explaining his view that actually there's evidence for 3 cultures there, the Incas being the last, and that there were 2 earlier cultures. And he believes that the megalithic work is entirely the work of these earlier cultures and has been wrongly handed to his ancestors, the Incas. And weirdly, up there near Cuzco, we have this curious stonework, and we also have it at Alacahoyuk in Turkey. Exactly the same kind of thing. Is this a coincidence, or is there something going on behind the scenes of history that we've not been fully informed about yet?
Yeah,
and oddly, these
patterns,
these T-shaped pillars that we see at Göbekli Tepe are repeated at the Temple of Edfu in Upper Egypt, and also in Peru.
Which is fine. It's fine.
Let's go to
Tiwanaku. Honestly, it's okay. What's not okay is lying about it.
And this 300-ton block, God knows how anybody got it up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I could even
like, I'm losing my mind, dude. I'm not losing any sleep. That's why I'm memeing about it. But I mean, it's like, I think after tonight,
in Tiwanaku.
like these two commands like are hilarious.
Blocks. We recognize them as a H because H is a letter in our alphabet. That's of course not what they meant to the ancients, but it's the shape I want to draw attention to.
The fact that I shared it with everyone.
Because that same shape appears at Göbekli Tepe.
There's no excuse anymore.
It appears on the belts of some of the figures.
Okay, collect a key card.
I'm not saying that people from Göbekli Tepe brought that idea
Spend
to
a
the
level looking
Americas.
for the key card.
I suspect it more likely the other way around,
That's
actually.
Cool.
But what I'm saying is that there appears to be an iconographic connection between the two sites.
I don't want to like. I don't want to like. The one thing he did say was armchair psychologist, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be an asshole and call him names, which I did. And I regret it, and I apologize for that. But
there's curious astronomical alignments at Tiwanaku, which make it clear that the site
objectively,
was
the behavior is very
in
compulsive.
10,500 BC. 12,500
That's what I'm going to say.
Years ago.
Objectively,
and this is because the rising point of the sun on the solstice changes as a result
compulsive.
of shifts in the obliquity of the
And
Earth's
what's the
axis,
goal?
over a
I'm not going to judge.
Tiwanaku
That's where I'm
makes
going.
much
That's
more
speculation.
Sense as 12,500 years old from an astronomical point of view than it does as 2,000 years old. Some other figures here. The ones on the right, starting here, are all from Tiwanaku. But over here we have the god Osiris from Egypt, a bearded figure, remembered by the ancient Egyptians as a bringer of the gifts of civilization, not only in Egypt, but in many other lands as well. And down here we have the earliest surviving representation of the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl, in Mexico.
For someone to say that a session is not needed...
and again, Quetzalcoatl is remembered in...
The point of having a session or not, it doesn't matter, because you could fake a session. You could fake a session. It's so obvious that you could fake a session. And there's nothing you can do.
Which is the face of a deity.
The only thing you can do is this ChatGPT bullshit I'm doing. I'm serious. But anyways, it's not that he, like, if I got this run, that run,
on the side of the pillar. And up here
I would have like the session,
we've highlighted it here,
and I would upload it. But even if you fake it, you would like fake a fake session, which is easy to do. But for someone to say that you don't need a session, it's like only a cheater would say that.
Then there's another problem. Okay,
I think he's guilty, man. I think he feels guilty. I think he's got a lot of guilt on his heart, as if he wants to be caught, which is fine. Admit it, man. Admit it, dude. We all made mistakes, dude. I cheated in the past. I still have secrets. Just, you know, not on GoldenEye or Perfect Dark. I didn't, maybe because I'm entering this community at an older age after the mistakes I've made, the wisdom I've learned. If you admit it, you might become our best bro, you know what I mean?
And besides, archaeology has the view that there's not much to find there. There has been some archaeology done.
Or at least
very little.
Hop on a stream.
That's 9.2 million square
get your
kilometers
odd job and RNG commands going. Let's have some fun about it, right?
It's around about the size of the Republic of China.
Dude, that's what I'm thinking.
It's like talking about the world and excluding China.
I'm thinking, like, is this the game?
We can't say we've got the
is him like,
when we haven't
would someone lying and trying to get into the elite with the fake runs? Is that the game? Is that the rush? Is that the high that they seek, that they do this for? Are they working smarter and not harder like I am?
River channels in the Sahara and lakes, and weirdly, recent surveys have demonstrated that there was a river channel exactly where indicated on that mysterious ancient.
I think it's fear, to be honest.
Here's Antarctica.
We're not gonna ban you forever, dude.
Well,
you don't need to.
This map was
we
drawn
love
in
that you put
world map.
that value at that
and
high
it's
level.
based on the latest science available in 1830. It's a really good map.
Yeah,
where it comes to South America and South Africa and Australia. But as you will observe,
I'm the lame.
Antarctica
you know why I'm in that movie?
Why is
I'm the lame cop with the stash.
They hadn't discovered it in 1813. They didn't discover it
the
until
dopey
1820.
cop. That's who I am right now.
So it's very odd
in this. The hater. I'm the hater dopey cop. No superpowers. Just hating on Batman. And Ledger.
It's interesting, this little legend down here. I've had it translated.
It's madness, dude.
Behold,
I don't know how I'm the only one, other than the council members.
With elegant appearance, a geography
It's
not
crazy.
so
It's
far
madness.
seen
It's
and
groupthink.
accurately engraved, which in fact preserves the shape and form of the human heart. And take care that it should
Somehow,
be at heart for you.
this individual's
And
gained
also presents
so
to your eye
much trust
provinces, islands, seas,
to counter
rivers, mountains,
everything
not so far seen nor known
of any
to some of the
logic,
great map papers of antiquity. Ptolemy,
independent of the
Eudoxius,
person.
Aristophanes, Macrobius. And we're told that these areas lay in darkness until this map was drawn.
It's like,
I suggest they lay in darkness because
if,
they were
even
on
if, like,
the much
I'm gonna
older
say it,
source maps
I've
that
been thinking about
Orontius,
it,
Phineas,
even
and
if
other
Perfect
map makers
Days,
drew upon. Source maps
not that he's
came
involved at
out
all.
into public
He's not.
circulation,
Say, like, the
from
best
about
player
the 1400s, 1300s
did this,
onwards, probably taken from Constantinople.
I wouldn't believe it.
And then what about
Because he says he got the run, says he got the run filming interlaced.
This is another area where very little
No session, not
we are
live.
talking about 27 million square
Okay,
kilometers.
we know the facts.
That's ropely
Mainly
equivalent
just
in size to
the
China,
duping
the
in the
US,
past week.
Europe, all added together.
And it's like,
That were above
even
water
if you
during the
went
Ice Age and that
crazy
were
on the level,
submerged at the end of the Ice
why
Age.
would you submit
Again, I'll come to those ancient
21? What, knowing you're gonna
On the
get
left,
it, but
we
you
have
submit
Southeast
it
Asia
with the
in
interlacing,
1507 and as it looks today.
and then you
And on
dupe
the
it,
right, we have an inundation map showing
and you
Southeast
claim it's
Asia
real.
and Australia as they looked 21,300 years ago when sea level was 400 feet lower than they are today. As
And
you
then
can
I'm
see,
the crazy one.
what today is an archipelago of islands and the Malaysian Peninsula was
I'm
a
glad you're
huge
here, man.
subcontinent-sized landmass. New Guinea was joined to Australia at that time.
I was
And it's
losing my mind,
interesting that
man.
this other
Losing
mysterious
my
map,
damn
again
mind.
drawn from older source maps, seems to depict the Sunda Shelf as it looked during the last ice age.
I don't know, man. I'm gonna stream a tiny
so
bit more,
this
not
map
that
is
much
showing
more.
present land masses and the sunken land masses that were submerged at the end of the Ice Age. The Sunda Shelf is particularly interesting. We now know that it was highly fertile, highly attractive land during the Ice Age. See, you didn't really want to spend a lot of time in the far northern hemisphere during the Ice Age. You wanted to get down near the equator. That was the best, warmest land on Earth. And this would have been a
No bully,
fantastic
though.
place for people to
I
settle
definitely
and
went
for
into
civilizations
psycho
to
mode there.
evolve. And that's why I'm so
Psycho
interested that
bully
we
mode, but
depicted
like,
it in Ancient Apocalypse. This work by geologist Danny
dude, it
Hillman
was like the Emperor has no clothes, man.
at,
It
Gurun
was
Padang
like
on the island
fucking.
of Java. And I'm suggesting,
crazy.
and Danny believes,
Yo,
this site
Master
is
Chief, what's up, bro?
originated
Oh, well,
more than
yeah, sorry, man. I
20,000
don't want
years
to talk
ago. It may have
smack.
been added
I don't
to
want to be this
by later
controversial
cultures.
stream. I
It's still
don't.
venerated
Are we gonna
today,
run?
but it's a very,
Where
very
is
old
this?
site in his view. It was one of those high areas that
I
was
can't
above
remember what's
water,
happening.
that remained above water even after sea level rose at the end of the Ice Age. It's on the island of Java, but that island of Java was connected to Sumatra and Borneo
So,
and
Master
the
Chief,
Malaysian
sorry, man. I don't
Peninsula
want
when the Sunda Shelf was above water.
to create any controversy.
Sahara Desert,
Welcome,
9 million
welcome.
square kilometers. 27 million square kilometers submerged at the end of the Ice Age, the best real estate on Earth. Is marine archaeology being done? Yes, it is. Marine archaeology is being done. It does exist. It's very expensive, and not a lot of it is done. But when I saw this headline, I thought, I've got somebody on my side. Archaeologist explains why we need to look underwater to understand the past. But then the explanation is so disappointing, because what he's looking for is shipwrecks from the 16 and
Shit.
1700s. And that's primarily what all marine archaeology is about. It's changing now. It's changing slowly. We know about Doggerland as a result. And archaeologists are
Doggerland.
beginning to look at the planet. But my point is that the vast area that was submerged during the end of the Ice Age has never
Gotta
been
learn
studied
more
by
about Doggerland.
at all. And they're not in a position to say that they know that there's no possibility of a lost civilization during the Ice Age, while they haven't investigated those 27 million square kilometers that are now underwater, when they haven't investigated the Sahara Desert. Well, Santa and I decided to do some investigation of our own underwater. And actually we spent the best part of 10 years scuba diving all over the world, following up tales and
What the
traditions
fuck,
from
man?
local divers and fishermen looking for structures underwater. And here at Ponape, the well-known site of Nan Madol, we followed up the advice of local divers, and we went underwater. And we find that the site doesn't just stop there. It continues underwater, and at first it continues with the same kind of construction that you see above water. But as you go deeper, as you get down to about 27 meters underwater, you start seeing
you know what command I haven't used tonight? Wholesome. The wholesome command. I'm gonna do that. What's what ChatGPT writes? ChatGPT can be very healing sometimes, honestly.
Closely resembles the pillars of Tinian in nearby area of the Pacific. Micronesia, and this is Tinian, and I'm suggesting again that that pillar underwater suggests to us that Tinian megaliths may be much older than we're told. That's my fins disappearing through a tunnel underwater in Japan. Santa and I did more than
You did
200
not disappoint
dives around the site. It's
ChatGPT, let me
called
tell you.
Yonaguni.
You did
I'm
not
going to show you
disappoint.
why I believe archaeologists are wrong. Archaeologists who've never dived there, who wouldn't even contemplate diving there. Diving at Yonaguni is really dangerous. There's a massive current there. You get swept away. If you try and stop and examine the structure, you end up fighting the sea. And believe me, you don't want to fight the sea. When the sea sends a current your way, the best thing you can do is just go with it and drift, and that's great fun. But you try to hang on to a structure, and the sea's going to beat you up badly.
What does it even mean, guys?
Well, that's the
What does
edges
it
of that
even
tunnel.
mean?
And as you
Is
can
it
see, it's a
real?
megalithic tunnel with
It's
one
touching
block
my
piled
heart.
on top of the other.
It's like a robot
And then at
touched
the
my
end of
heart
the tunnel,
tonight.
We see,
What does it
this.
mean?
2 blocks positioned side by side. And that's me just diving down beside those blocks to show their nature and their scale. They're enormous. And archaeologists say, oh, no problem. They must have fallen from some cliff overhead. The only problem is there is no cliff overhead, and never has been. So those 2 blocks, this is them in context. There they are. That tunnel that I went through is down here. There's the 2 blocks, and then there's this massive, completely natural stone outcropping. I'm not disputing that it's natural, but as we continue to explore that outcropping, what do we find? We find a flat terrace, and we find steps on the terrace. And in my mind, this speaks strongly of human workmanship. Japan is a megalithic culture. Many of the megaliths in Japan have never really been properly studied. This one is called Masado no Iwafuna, the upside-down boat stone, in the Asuka area of Japan. It's interesting that if you go around to the other side of that huge megalith, you'll see how it was created. They cut out these grooves in it, creating these outcroppings, which if they'd finished the work would have been smoothed off and left to look like the rest of the structure. Oddly enough, exactly the same stone cutting technique is found underwater at Yonaguni, and since it's nearly 30 meters underwater, it's been underwater for more than 12,000 years. Above water in Japan, you do have megalithic stone circles. The one at the top left is from Hokkaido. Aomori on the right, very small river stones used to create a circle.
Man, I'm terrible at that initial lineup. I gotta go for that back guard immediately. I'm going for the front guard sometimes. That's why I'm always getting boosted by the back. I think I just gotta aim for that back guard, and just pray for that front guard to be in the right spot.
And lo and behold, what did we find?
Thanks, what I gotta do.
And indeed,
This
circles
is a
made of
fixed
small river
spot.
stones as well.
The back guard is a
30
fixed
meters
spot.
underwater.
I think I should aim on the
12,000
fixed
years old
spot
plus.
of the back guard
What is
and not
going
the
on
first
here?
guard, which I
Well,
was
that's me
trying
with
to
a
do.
video camera up there and a diver down there beside the
I think we
central
got it now.
upright for scale. These megaliths, like the pillars at Karahan Tepe, are carved out of bedrock. They're carved out of bedrock. And it's really difficult for me to see how nature could have done this. I mean, there I am on top of the central upright. Look at the way the outer curve of the central upright matches the inner curve of one of the outer uprights. Here we are now in Taiwan. From that island of Yonaguni, Taiwan is actually visible on a clear day. Here we're underwater with local diver Steve Shia at Taiwan, and he's showing us a wall he discovered underwater, about 20 meters underwater. And that wall has battlements, and it has a kind of plaza in front of it. And unless there's any doubt that it's man-made, let's get up close and look at it. It's made of individual blocks of stone. This doesn't happen naturally. This is a man-made structure underwater.
Look at that.
Which archaeology has paid absolutely zero attention to. And then what about India? Diving in Indian waters is often quite murky. There's a lot of sediment in the water. Makes it very difficult to see. But here's South India as it looked during the Ice Age, when sea level was much lower. Sri Lanka was joined to South India. And I'm interested in two sites in particular in South India, Pumpahar and Mahabalipuram. Pumpahar we heard about from the National Oceanographic Institute of India. We're based in Goa. And they kindly actually took us diving at Pumpahar and showed us what they are confident is a man-made structure. They describe it as a U-shaped structure at 29 meters underwater. And I apologize for the visibility, but that's what you dive in there. Fishermen get their nets caught on it, causes trouble to fishermen all the time. In fact, they would like it removed. And there are individual blocks surrounding it. Further north at Mahabalipuram, Santha and I, who investigated this area first, Santha speaks the Tamil language as her first language. So we were able to communicate easily and fluently with local fishermen. And we asked them at Mahabalipuram, is there anything underwater that you guys know about? And they said, yeah, there's a whole city out there. And we're really annoyed about it because we keep catching our nets on it and we have to send down divers, and not scuba divers, free divers, and sometimes they get killed. And we've asked the government to do something about it, but they don't believe us. Well, we believe them. It took about 2 years to organize the expedition.
It's my fault.
We had to involve the Scientific Exploration Society led by John Blashford Snell.
That right strafe.
You can see it was a very high-tech expedition.
So shit after the upload, it's terrible.
And off we went, diving off
compared
the
to
waters
left
of
strafe.
Mahabalipuram, and immediately we saw the fishermen were right, that there are man-made structures underwater, 2 blocks side by side here, a bit of a wall sticking above the sand.
Because you're looking at the whole level in right
feature.
strafe, it's
There
just
I'm
the
putting my
worst.
Dive knife into the gap between 2 blocks.
But I think it's
Another
the
pair of
fastest.
blocks there, and a curved feature. There's so much more underwater at Mahabalipuram. Well, following that investigation, it was decided that some archaeology would be done, but to my
Can be the
frustration,
fastest.
the archaeology so far has been confined to the intertidal zone, just down to 5 meters, and they haven't been down to 27 to 30 meters where we found these structures yet. So, you know, if Santa and I, out of our own pocket, can go diving and find stuff underwater which doesn't fit the picture of history that we're given by archaeologists, what would be found if real investment were put into searching the underwater, the submerged continental shelves? I think a great deal would be found. There's another area of the world where archaeologists haven't looked enough, and that area of the world is the Amazon rainforest. It's about 7 million square kilometers in size.
Oh, that was a nice pickup.
And there have been tragic clearances of the Amazon, as we all know. Terrible mistake to cut down old growth rainforests and replace it with soy farms to feed cattle so that we can all eat hamburgers. What a stupid decision, especially since rainforest soils are not particularly fertile, and they are fertilized by the fall of vegetation onto them. Once you remove the trees, you're in a place, that soybean farm's only going to last 10 years, then it's going to be useless. So the destruction of the Amazon is a huge mistake that human beings are making. We've still got 5.5 million square kilometers left covered by rainforest. And extraordinary evidence is beginning to come out of those 5.5 million kilometers. Not just that genetic signal that connects peoples of the Amazon to peoples of Australasia, but real archaeology. This is in one of the areas already cleared. And this is the work of Marty Parson and Sanasan Oloma and Alkeo Ramsey, who've been investigating what they describe as the Amazonian geoglyphs. And here we have a square with an embankment around it. And here we have a square with its own embankment surrounding a circle with its own embankment. It actually looks a bit like the henges that we find in England, very like Avebury Henge, as a matter of fact, in many ways. And this is where it's happening. It's in the Brazilian state of
Awesome,
Acre.
buddy.
And
3
it's the
times.
location
Will
of
you
the
react
principal
3 times
geoglyph
as
sites that had
fast?
been
Can you
discovered
imagine?
by 2019.
I don't know how you type so fast.
There's
You
another
type
one.
faster
they're
than
very
I think.
geometrical, these geoglyphs. The circle enclosing a square or an oval enclosing a square are repeated again and again. And here we have these curious little scallops taken out of a square and another circle.
I think I love it.
Taquino is a massive site.
I know, right? It's too dangerous. I think I love it. You could be manipulated, like you could, because you could be reading faster than you think. Yo, wizard power, thank you. Appreciate that.
And the smaller square, which has been extensively damaged, measures 130 by 130
I need it.
meters. The larger square is 40 meters wide.
We've been having pretty good runs. We've been pretty consistent. That's the thing, right? My consistency is improving a lot.
So, keep in mind
with this strat, which is not the fastest strat, but speed pace. Moonraker here, still.
Just keep it in mind for a moment. I'll come to why it matters.
Legend.
Fazenda, Piranha, and Severino Calazans are both oriented to true astronomical north, as are the Giza pyramids. And Severino Calazans on the right has the same footprint as the Great Pyramid of Giza, measuring 230 meters along each side, and is equally precisely aligned to true astronomical north.
Finished his mission essay earlier.
God damn, which is one of the great discoveries.
Yeah, I love it. I'm addicted to it.
Art. And as you can
I love this level.
Part of the art of ayahuasca is geometry.
The Japanese has better, easier autoing. Right, everyone. I don't know what system you're playing on. I play on Xbox and N64. I'm playing on N64 right now. Right.
We'll almost certainly at some point or another see geometrical patterns. They're very common in the stages of the journey.
Yeah, everyone uses
what
Japanese.
Is depicted here is visions seen under the influence of ayahuasca.
So I also use it.
And on the right here we have an amazing painting by the late great Pablo Amaringo. The great
I have Xbox, so I have the Xbox emulator.
He shows us something of the
what happened? Why did my Twitch? Sorry, I lost chat there. What? Why would you do that?
And it's seen as literally as a portal. Ayahuasca is seen as a portal that takes us to the other side.
Nice speedruns, nice.
I want to be clear
nice,
that
dude.
Ayahuasca is very serious business. I've had 7.
Yeah, the Switch Golden is pretty dope, man.
With ayahuasca.
If you're a man.
I'm not in a rush to have my next.
Alright,
I want to dispel the myth at the moment
because you can get the controller too if you want, like the N64 controller.
Unfortunately, medical science
if you want.
To catch up with the fantastic potential, therapeutic potential of these ancient.
There's Japanese GoldenEye on Switch. You can change your country or whatever to Japan, and then you can play on the Japanese version.
And you're going to go through a bit of a physical ordeal. You're going to vomit. You're going to have diarrhea.
Are you in the?
Nobody's rushing.
Are you in the Discord?
And actually, just looking at the brew there,
Switch,
just does make me feel a little bit sick.
Discord.
So you have to brace yourself for an ayahuasca experience.
I think there's a
and another of
Switch controller.
You'll notice that there are creatures called
nice.
in this vision. Those
so thinking switch countries, I understand.
Body of an animal and the head of a human being, or it can be
I don't know how they do that, but anyways, you don't need Japanese, but
which means human. Again, these are very commonly
for some levels you
I've
might.
seen them myself many times.
Depends what.
In visions in
depends what you want to do.
Entities are encountered. And often they take animal form or mixed animal and human form.
This is good, yeah.
And here the Tucano of the Amazon are particularly
nice.
Their culture is particularly closely connected to ayahuasca.
Thanks,
and
man.
here we see a Tucano shaman guiding his son through an ayahuasca experience, helping him navigate the infinite terrain of the other side.
We're really close to.
In the other photographs, we see Tucano ayahuasca art.
We've had a lot of really
which
close
again
runs tonight.
is reflecting the geometry seen in ayahuasca visions. I'm going to read this. This is from Gerardo Rachel Dolmatov, one of the great experts on Tucano. Although any member of the Tucano community may drink ayahuasca, the deeper mysteries of the brew are primarily the work of the shaman, whose responsibility it is to travel through the portal.
Yeah, it's a lot of
to the other
resets.
side, whenever required to negotiate with powerful
I think it's
supernaturals
more
and
fun to play than it is to watch.
where
but
matters of the
I
greatest
love
importance
I love
must be
when people
resolved,
play
a group
watch
of
this, when
players
people play this
will
level.
work together, consuming
But then again, I'm
massive
not watching
quantities of
myself play
ayahuasca
this level.
until they reach a point lying in their hammocks where they feel they are ascending to the Milky Way. The ascent to the Milky Way is not easily accomplished. An apprentice will hardly ever be able to rise immediately to this sublunary region, but rather will learn to do so after many trials. At first, he will barely rise.
Yeah,
over
world
the
record is
horizon.
insane here.
The next time, perhaps he will reach a point corresponding to the position of
1:33.
the sun at 9 a.m., then at 10 a.m., and so on until at last, in a single
1 minute and
soaring
33
flight, he will reach
seconds.
the zenith. So, in summary, the shaman's
Yeah,
visionary
my time
journey
is
through the ayahuasca
35th,
portal involves a
35th
leap,
place
or after sufficient
for this
practice, a
level
soaring
and difficulty.
flight to the Milky Way. Not the final goal. It's a way station. Beyond the Milky Way lies
Yeah,
the entrance to
Ryan
the
White
other world.
Goose.
And again, I'll quote
Our
Gerardo
White Goose.
Dolmatov. It is said that
And
the individual
Perfect
dies
Ace.
when he drinks the potion, and that now his spirit returns to the
And
uterine regions of the beyond, only to be reborn there and to return to his ordinary existence.
Jesus
when the
Christ.
trance is over.
Do I
This
literally
then
forget
is
the other person
conceived
that has
as an
that time?
acceleration of time, an anticipation of death and rebirth. So ayahuasca is a kind of guide to the afterlife realm. It's a kind of book of the dead.
Are
not
they the
written
only
in
two that
text,
have
but
that
in
time?
direct experience. And on the lower left there,
Are you serious?
this is.
I think they're the
entrance
only
to
two.
the other world,
I
as
have to know
depicted
this.
in
Because
Tucano
Gus
ayahuasca.
Riola got 134.
So I'll bring you back to that diagram, that site at Fazenda, Colorado, that I drew your attention to. And I can't help noticing.
Thanks
how
for
similar
asking. Because we
this
need to
part of it
learn.
is to the
Need to
entrance
know.
to the other world, as depicted in Tucano art.
Wow, they
There's much
are.
other research
They
that
are the
supports
only
this, that
two.
the Amazonian geoglyphs were connected
Ryan
to the
White
same
and Ryan Isran.
complex
And they both use
death
kind of different
afterlife beliefs that
strats, which
flourished
is
in ancient
insane.
Egypt
Which
and,
blows my
I'll
mind.
come to this, and in the
There's
ancient
still more
Mississippi
time to be
Valley
shed on this level.
So, top left, this is a
They
great
both use
Western
different
ayahuasca
strats.
artist, my friend Martina Hoffman. She's depicting some
I
of
think
the
Ace's
many
run is just
manifestations
even
of
more insane.
Mother Ayahuasca.
Because
Generally how
for
we
him
in the
to
West
do what he
experience
does
the entity
after
behind
doing
the
it
ayahuasca brew, who has harnessed the ayahuasca brew to
is just
access
too
human
ridiculous.
consciousness.
It's like only
In
Ace
some
can do that.
cultures,
And he did.
the spirit of ayahuasca is seen as male, not as female.
I don't want to spoil the
That's particularly
runs,
so
but like
amongst
what they do,
a
how
few
they
of the
differ.
Amazonian cultures, but generally the spirit is seen as female.
Oh my god,
She's a
what's this
shapeshifter,
game?
big
I can't
ancient monster.
remember.
I'm just struck by the similarity to this Egyptian image from the right, the goddess Isis feeding Ankh immortal life to the pharaoh Seti I. And let's not forget, for more than 3,000 years, the ancient Egyptians put their best minds to work on the mystery of death. And we should not dismiss their explorations into what happens after death as simple fantasies, because there's 3,000 years of work went into those explanations. Of course, scientists don't believe in any survival of death. Science, which is focused largely on weighing, measuring, and counting, we're just biological machines. We got our consciousness, it's an accidental byproduct. It's an epiphenomenon of brain activity.
That's
We
pretty
needed
impressive.
these big
You talk about
dreams
me?
to
Thanks, bro.
complete the jump of the universe.
Thanks, man.
And,
I put a lot of hours into this.
as an accident,
I think
our
the
big
only reason why,
brains
well, not
gave
the
us
only reason.
consciousness.
The reason why I'm playing this is because I see a lot
The
of
notion,
opportunity
therefore, that
here
consciousness
right
might
now.
survive
Currently,
death
it won't
is
always be
abhorrent
here.
to most scientists, particularly
And I like the
scientists
level.
like Richard Dawkins, who somehow knows.
Seems
that
like
there
you
is
do
no
too,
life after
because it's
death.
awesome.
How can anybody
And you seem
possibly
awesome.
know that? It's a great mystery. None of us know what's going to happen.
I don't know.
Maybe we just will blink out and there's nothing.
What's that?
Or
The
maybe
Frigate
there is something,
21?
as many ancient traditions suggest. I think we should listen.
I
to those
don't.
ancient
I mean, I don't think so.
Ayahuasca means the vine
It's
of souls
off
or
the
the vine of the
ranks.
dead.
It's
It
not
does
on
so
there,
for
and
good
the user's
reasons.
banned
There are
as
many
per the
similarities
Elite
in the
Council's
ayahuasca journey
decision.
to what we call near-death experiences in the West. A sense of encounter with those who have passed on,
Frigate
deceased
21.
relatives, communicating with us. Very frequently, painful. Ayahuasca requires us to confront.
I think so. That was the vote.
Our own behavior during life. It puts
That
us
was the
on
result of the vote.
She puts us on the spot. Look at your own life and look at it seriously. What have you done with it? And this is so similar to the ancient Egyptian view, which is expressed symbolically as the judgment.
But I
of the
mean,
soul.
how can the issue is that like, they also like
in one of the tombs of the nobles
they
on the
wrote
West
this
Bank,
publicly
that's,
too, right? Like
Luxor in Upper Egypt.
that this
You see the
individual lied
deceased
to the
being
council.
ushered into what is called the Hall of Ma'at. This is the goddess Ma'at.
To lie
That
directly
feather that
to
is
the
her symbol
person.
that she wears on her headdress
I can
is
only
the feather of
imagine
truth and cosmic
how
justice,
the trust has
harmony.
been potentially
The soul is brought into her
damaged.
presence and then confronts this scene, which is the weighing of the soul. The soul depicted here as the heart.
It's like,
of the
how can you?
individual,
How can you believe
weighed in
anything?
the scales against the feather of Ma'at. You do not want your heart to be heavy with wickedness and to outweigh
But,
that feather.
You know,
want to be in balance with that
they can
faith
atone. There can be
from the ancient
atonement.
Egyptian point of view. Now there are many moral aspects to the ancient Egyptian judgment.
Like
scene. These guys up
2013,
here are called the
2015.
42 negative assessors. And they're going to ask the soul 42 questions. And ideally, the soul should be able to answer no to every one of them. They include some of the 10 Commandments. Did you kill? Did you steal? Did you lie? Ideally, we should be able to answer no to all of them, but the ancient Egyptians knew that we are frail human beings. We will constantly make mistakes. We will constantly backslide during life. The point is, do we use this opportunity of life
Oh, that was pretty cool
to
though.
make ourselves better people? Or do we waste that opportunity of life? So there's the scales.
Could they not have just given me the ammo for that, just for the memes?